I would like to call the May 14th, 2013 Longmont City Council study session to order. Could we please start with a roll call, Sarah?
Mayor Coombs.
Present.
Council members Bagley.
Here.
Finley. Here. Levison. Here. Samore.
Here.
Santos.
Here.
Witt. Here. Mayor, you have a quorum.
All right, let's stand for a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Public invited to be heard. The first person on the list is the Longmont firefighters. So please come down, and everybody else, you can state your name and address, but go ahead. You can state your name and address.
Your Honor. Am I on?
Yeah.
Okay. My name is Hank McCarthy. I'm here representing the Longmont firefighters. I actually live out of the city, but we're representing the firefighters. In the coming weeks, you will be presented with a plan that purports to improve fire and EMS services to the citizens of Longmont. We, the firefighters of Longmont, believe it is always appropriate to look for new ways to serve this community, and will always work with fire administration to further improve service. However, we are unanimous in our belief that some of the plans, or possibly the only plan being presented, decreases service to the citizens and increases the risk to the community and firefighter safety to an unacceptable level with little or no benefit to taxpayers or voters. You will be asked to rush into a decision to meet an unrealistic timeline and without the opportunity to fully appreciate the risks and ramifications of that decision. Within the limited plans available, There are two that allow the department to maintain its current service levels and to take the time to effectively evaluate all potential outcomes. Although fire administration has worked on the plan for several months, we were only made aware of it in the past month and only after the final decision was made. We look forward to working with fire administration, the city manager, and city council to come up with alternatives that can increase service without increasing the risk to citizens and firefighters. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dixon Dick, please come down and state your name and address for the record.
I'm shorter. I'm Dixon Dick. My address is 3806 Florentine Circle. Good evening, council members. I'd like to talk about the Gigabit Network project in terms of creativity and what that means for jobs in growing communities. Let me give you an example with a special moment of inquiry. One day I sat down at my computer and on the screen was a bunch of sophisticated commands. Was I hacked? As I looked closely, I realized I was looking at a recipe to deploy a Minecraft server. My teenage son wanted access to someone else's Minecraft world, and though he knew nothing of Unix, Java, or programming, he pieced together what he needed to get the job done, in turn serving his version of a new world to the internet. As a more concrete example, astronomy researchers recently finished a project expecting to write 100 papers on 80 terabytes of data collected over 7 years. Inspired by increasing global internet access and high-speed networks, they published their data openly. Instead of 100 papers, they produced 5,000. All because globally, others could access their world, try new ideas, and apply tools from different disciplines. Getting access to data and each other is critical not only for science and education, but today for business. Council members, you've already seen this approach to inquiry in the Longmont Hackathon. This unique approach to cross-pollinating data and ideas to create new things and services of value. Our workforce must be able to think and act in this way to create jobs while growing and attracting creative talent to Longmont. Think of the companies already in Longmont and what they can do. Xilinx, Digital Globe, Seagate, Amgen, Western Digital, Dot Hill, to name a few. Jackson Roberts and the Longmont Hackathon offered you this brief glimpse into what the next generation of students and entrepreneurs can do. Instant access to worlds of data is what education and business need. Our future employees, businesses, and students need the speed and capacity to access whole worlds so they can explore with their minds, so they can cross techniques, cross swords, create, and compete. Crucially important is the need for guidance and priorities for this access to be set by our community, not commercial priorities. The time is now for our community to create value, to invent, start new companies, and make our way in a more competitive world where global communities compete for creative resources as never before. Please vote for option A on our Gigabit Network. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Scott Converse.
So I knew you'd pick me next because I have the nerd costume on, along with Dixon, so. So, as you know, my name's Scott Converse. You guys probably remember me from the hackathon. I was part of the team, your team, to put that together, did most of the fundraising, and I think it turned out okay. We did all right there. So I made a decision a while ago to come back to Longmont. And really, that was based on a lot of different factors, but one of the main ones was really truly this gigabit network. That excited me. It was one of the reasons that I decided I wanted to be here. And I think that this network is going to spur all kinds of new innovation here in Longmont. It's going to change how we educate our kids. It's going to change how we live our lifestyles. It's going to jumpstart economic development, and it's going to create new businesses, and it's going to create new jobs here in town. For example, I'm in the process right now of starting a thing called a hackerspace, a Longmont hackerspace, also known as a makerspace. These are places where technologists and artists and business people share tools and knowledge, and they come up with new kinds of art, new products, and often they create new businesses. There are hundreds of these makerspaces all over the United States. There's one in Denver, there's one in Boulder, but we don't have one. But because of the great technical community that we have here, as well as this incredible network that's coming up. I mean, it's amazing. I've decided I'm going to start a hackerspace here in Longmont. So if you're interested, anybody's interested in that, go to meetup.com and search on hackerspace, and you'll see where we're having our meeting and what's happening there. So as I said earlier, this network creates all kinds of great innovations. So you're probably aware of what the school district's doing right now. Patty Quinones is putting together an innovation center, and one of the things she'll be doing is heavily using this network and doing all kinds of new education and new educational systems for our kids using it. There's also a group here in town right now that's putting together a plan to build a new next generation data center. And that's largely due to Longmont's low power costs and its gigabit network. This wouldn't be happening if it weren't for these things all together. So I really think this network is about creating value for this community. You know, any other entity that provides a data network utility is really doing one thing. They're taking tolls. That's really what they're doing. They extract value. They don't add value. And what you're doing here is you're adding value to the city. So I also strongly encourage you to vote option A as per the agenda. And I think we should let's get on with it. Tell your folks in the city to figure out how we can get this into our businesses and into our homes. You not only want this, but our community really needs this. And unlike some people I think might be in the audience tonight, I am not being paid to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Johann Backman, followed by Sarah Jane Snyder.
Mr. Mayor, I'm Johan Backman. I live on 649 Teal Circle. I want to bring an international perspective on why I think we should build a network here in Longmont. I'm going to give an example of municipal networks in Sweden. Sweden is about the size of California. It has 9.5 million people. In Sweden, there are 200 municipal networks. 150 of them have a clear commercial focus. There are 750,000 households, and about 1/3 of all the businesses are connected to municipal networks. What is the investment case? About $4 billion have been invested in municipal networks since the late 90s. In 2011 alone, $310 million were invested. And here's an interesting point. Only 7% of that came from government funds. 70% of the networks are investing on its own cash flow, meaning the profits they make, they put back into the communities. They see a 50% return on investment over 5 years thanks to lowering costs and more jobs created. What is the benefit to the community? Cost for communication is down 30 to 50% with better services. 89% of the communities in Sweden see a de facto boost in economic development thanks to an active municipal network. I'm going to give you an example. There's a town up in northern Sweden called Luleå. About 75,000 people live there. They have a few assets similar to ours, cheap and clean power. They have cold weather, and they have a gigabit network. Their council and their business people put together a business case, and they went to Palo Alto, California in 2009. 18 months later, Facebook announced, we're going to put our first data center in Luleå, the first data center outside of the US. 300,000 square foot, 120 megawatt data center. What's the impact to the community in Luleå? Since they put the shovel in the ground a year ago, real estate values are up 19%. Unemployment, for the first time ever in Sweden, is lower than the national average, 3.3%. Applications to the technical disciplines at the local university is up by 24%. And they're building a 5-star hotel downtown Luleå. I have read the agenda, and I urge you guys to vote for option A. I think we should build a gigabit fiber network here in Longmont, not only for providing better and cheaper internet services, but to boost economic development and make Longmont an even better place to live. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah Jane Snyder, followed by Terry McHugh.
My name is Sarah Jane Snyder. I live at 2944 Sand Dollar Court here in Longmont. Thank you, Mayor Combs, City Council, and City staff. As a resident of the City of Longmont, I am total support of the Power Communications plan to provide citywide hookup to the fiber optic network. I did not think that in my lifetime I would see internet connectivity being provided as a utility. When you think about it, the infrastructure is already there. Let's do it. I'm excited about the speeds and the reliability and hope that it can be made affordable for the masses, especially my generation. We all say technology is changing so fast, we can't even imagine what is coming next. We need to be prepared. Let's continue with the vision that the city started in 1977 and move forward on this. Thank you.
Terry McHugh.
My name is Terry McHugh. I reside at 2185 Hackberry Circle. I come before you tonight really upset. In 32 years in Longmont, I have never seen a more tone-deaf, out-of-touch council, nor ever seen one who so arrogantly and dismissively ignores the clearly stated will of the electorate. The vast majority of this city does not want fracking in this city. There's no big philosophical anti-gas or anything like that. It's an industrial process that has no business in one of America's finest small cities. That's all there is to it. I don't expect you guys to defend us any better than you did when you abandoned our eastern buffer to our expansionist neighbors. For that, I call on you to leave. If Longmont is typical, about 20% of the populace actually uses marijuana, and yet 58% of the adult population voted to end the destructive, expensive, totally ineffective prohibition of marijuana, which actually leads to more drug use by our children and a totally unregulated atmosphere. Further, the people instructed you to establish a regulated, controlled marketplace that does not sell to children. If you refuse to do so, you are encouraging the black market and encouraging sales to children. For that, I'd ask you to leave. And then we come to the mall. We find that the secret anchor wasn't revealed because it's indeed an anchor. It's an anchor that's going to drag this project down into a sea of mediocrity. Instead of getting a Dillard's, a Macy's, or a Nordstrom's, we're going to get the worst possible example of big box, low-end junk. The Sam's Club was promised out east with no subsidy. They switched to the west. Now we're going to pay for their building. Whole Foods gets a subsidy after Sprouts has put in an absolutely marvelous store with no subsidies whatsoever. If you think that Whole Foods won't drain off 20 to 30% of Sprouts' business, well, you're smoking that particular legal substance. You've been taken for a ride. In the offices of Newmark Merrill and down in Bentonville, Arkansas, they're giving a lot of high fives and a lot of laughter at our expense. I believe it's a conspiracy that goes back. Newmark Merrill and Pop Canatoni were partnered up. It was worth $26 million. Presto Pufo, it becomes worth 8.5, and then they ask you to steal property from foreigners.
Thank you. Ken Schultz, followed by John Cody.
Ken Schutz, 2206 Eagleview Circle in Longmont. I wanted to come before you as well, Council and Mayor, to speak to the network that you're going to be considering tonight. You know that I've led many conversations about with the district and in the city and with business leaders in the community. What I want you to know is that there are very few things, even before this network has been created, there are very few things that have led collaborative thought like the thought that this network might be in place. Before it's ever in place, there are many, many discussions that have been led, have been initiated, that has brought those three entities together: business leaders, school district, and the city. What I want you to know is that that kind of collaboration, if that's happening before the network goes in, I can only imagine what happens after the network goes in. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. John Cody.
Mayor Coombs and members of council, my name is John Cody. I'm president and CEO of the Longmont Area Economic Council at 528 Main Street. I'm here for a couple of reasons that are very much related. First and foremost, to express my hearty support, ardent support for the Gigabit Network. Longmont as a community has a long history of public infrastructure investment. And I would say there's plenty of evidence today to demonstrate that it has paid off in spades. We have a great community, we have great companies, and overall this is a great place to live and work. This investment, like others before it, in water, in transportation, and actually the realization now of a dream that started 16 odd years ago, to provide fiber to every home in Longmont. And I think it will do nothing but benefit both our residents and the reputation of our community. As I understand it, will be one of less than 100 communities nationwide that will have this kind of capacity. So I would like to lend my full support towards it. In a related item, but a different one, I would also like to formally ask the council to pursue a change in the name of the Metropolitan Statistical Area through the Department of Census. We have Fort Collins, Loveland. We have Denver, Aurora, Lakewood. We have communities all across the country that are listed as part of the MSA. We are the second largest city in Boulder County, and MSA is simply listed as Boulder. This is a smart place. It's a community that winds up getting a lot of accolades. We are part of that, but unfortunately, we get left out of the recognition. So what I would ask that you look into pursuing a change in the name of the MSA, because even though we all know this is a great place, we also have to tell that story outside of Longmont. So thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Travis Whipple, followed by Steve Elliott.
So it's kind of happenstance that, Travis Whipple, 1368 Clemson Drive. So it's kind of happenstance I showed up here tonight. My son needed to attend a city council meeting, and it's been a while, so I decided to grace you with my presence, or be graced by yours. And talking to Councilwoman Witt, discovered that you were talking about the Gigabit Network. And it's interesting because it brought up memories of a conference call that I had with Jeff Crank, the president of Americans for Prosperity, myself, the former mayor of Longmont, and Joel Champion, the former president of Boulder County Republican Party, when this issue was being presented on the ballot. And I'd had other conversations with various council members at the time as well. And we were led to believe that this body had absolutely no intention whatsoever of ever running this network themselves as a city utility, that the city was seeking outside third-party businesses to perform this action for us, so that we as taxpayers would not be obligated to run fiber to every house in the city, nor would our utilities include this gigabit, and thus set up a situation where the municipality of Longmont would be in direct competition with multiple very viable commercial entities, namely Comcast and CenturyLink. And while I was very disturbed at what I had learned with regard to how CenturyLink, then Quest and Comcast, put forth a bill to prevent the city earlier on from using this, and thus we were persuaded to support the ballot initiative, I have yet to hear or see anything on the website that says that this city has adequately pursued that endeavor. And even if they have and nobody is interested, I myself am still not interested in the city of Longmont running direct competition with commercial venues. We already have government takeover on multiple levels, from our health care all across the board. We don't need government takeover of internet, even if you can provide a better service. Let's open it up to a third-party competition. That's what we were told. Along those same lines, and you probably, everybody's going to think I'm wearing my tin hat, but I see this leading to smart meters. I've heard this council deny that we're considering smart meters, but there's $100,000 or $100,000 in our budget for the next 4 years to investigate smart meters. What a powerful smart meter grid we're going to have when we have fiber optic run to every house. Thank you.
Steve Elliott?
My name's Steve Elliott. I live at 800 Martin Street. Been there for 29 years, right next to Kensington Park. I'd like to say a few words about the fiber optic system. Either you are closing your eyes to a situation you do not wish to acknowledge, or you are unaware of the caliber of the opportunities indicated by the presence of fiber optics in your community. Well, you got some choices to make, my friends, right here in Gigabit City. Why, sure, I'm an internet geek. Always proud to say it, always proud to say it. I consider the hours I spend with a mouse in my hand to be golden. Helps you cultivate horse sense, a cool head, and a keen eye. Ever tried to chase down a Wikipedia source with a half-endorsed reference and a broken URL? But just as I say, it takes judgment, brains, and a good search engine to track down the source you need. But it doesn't mean doodly squat if all you're doing is waiting for that little download thermometer to go across the screen. I call that sloth. I call that muda. Look it up. But you've got choices to make, my friends, tonight. 52 years ago, Longmont came together to create the City of Light. And what did that get us? The cheapest, most reliable electric system in the state. Ladies and gentlemen, fortune smiles on you. You have been given the privilege and the honor tonight to cast the vote for Longmont's greatness. Now is the time to act. Now is the time to plant that fiber and watch it grow. Now is the time to make Longmont the lowest price, most reliable internet service in the state. Now, wouldn't that be something? We voted for it. We want it. We want it now. Longmont is ripe with business plans just itching for gigabit access. You got your startup coders, you got your big consultants, you got the online training, you got your cloud computing, and your server farms just waiting for a crop. Give us the power, give us the speed, and stand back. You can wipe those download wait times off the map and put Gigabit City on the map. All you have to do is say those magic three little words. Make it so. The first big step on the road to greatness. First is free Wi-Fi at the library, then it's super fast downloads for your Kindle. Then home medical conferencing, international jobs right here in Longmont for online workers. I say make the choice, my friends. Make it so. Give us the infrastructure, give us the tools, we'll do the rest. With a capital G, that rhymes with B, and that stands for gigabit. Option A, make it so. Thank you for your attention.
Hey, no clapping, please. That's pretty good. Is there any... Is there anyone else in the audience who'd like to address council at this time? Okay, seeing no one, I'll close public invited to be heard. So there's no special reports, so I guess it's time for the study session item. Sarah, do you want to introduce the first item?
Mayor, your first and only item is a discussion on the broadband feasibility study and next steps.
Well, good evening, Mayor Combs and members of council. I'm not sure how I follow that, though. We're going to try. Tonight, I'm here along with several other members of the LPC team who have worked for many years to try to bring the benefits of a fiber optic-based high-speed network here to our community. We also have with us tonight our consultants from Uptown Services, and Vince Jordan will be introducing them in a few minutes. As some of the speakers have alluded to, it's been a 16-year journey. It all started back in 1997 when we worked with Platte River Power Authority to complete the installation of 144 fiber optical cable that looped the city and tying all our electrical substations together as well as other city facilities. Its primary mission was to provide the electric utility and other city of Longmont organizations with high-speed data connectivity. However, we always knew that, and we knew at that time that it could certainly be leveraged to be the backbone for a robust citywide fiber to the anywhere network. a network that we felt at the time would certainly set Longmont apart from other cities in the country, and would certainly help to enhance local economic development, quality of education, and lifestyle. You know, our preference from the beginning had always been to build out the network with a private sector partner. And there were multiple outreach efforts over the years to incumbents as well as outside telecommunication companies. In April of 2000, a private company finally did step forward and to partner with the city. But after completing only some very preliminary work, the company terminated its agreement with the city. They filed for bankruptcy, which was not unlike many telecommunication companies back in that particular time frame. In 2005, incumbent telecommunication companies lobbied the state legislature to pass Senate Bill 05-152, which you all know prohibited cities like Longmont from providing broadband services to their own communities without a vote of the citizens. In 2011, after a negative ad campaign waged by incumbents spending close to $500,000, which at the time was the largest amount of money ever spent on a campaign in Longmont's history. But our citizens got together and voted to reestablish their city's right to provide these services. Now, back in 1997, the city's original vision of building a citywide fiber optics network was indeed way ahead of most cities in the country. Probably not so much anymore. You know, while we pursued the private sector option to help us build the network, including pursuing companies like Google, other communities have taken the bold step to build and operate their own municipally owned broadband networks, and Vince is going to talk a little bit more about that during his presentation. But, you know, in spite of all the setbacks over the years, our city councils, I think as well as our community, have been pretty consistent in the desire to achieve what was the original vision. And tonight our consultants are going to go carefully through the feasibility study that they've worked with our staff to complete. And we think that based on the research and community input that we've done, we feel the study gives us a pretty clear picture of what we're going to need to accomplish to make this citywide fiber to the anywhere network a success. I'm going to caution you up front that there are some significant details included in a lot of the slides, technical details that we really don't expect to get into tonight. You know, not unlike the electric distribution utility business, the broadband services is a very technical business, and we sometimes struggle with how much technical information to include in the presentations. But we wanted to make sure we included enough to give you all a sense of the level of rigor and detail that's gone into this particular study. I think you also have to keep in mind that the feasibility study that we're going to talk about tonight only looks at the economics from the utilities perspective, not unlike a private company may try to assess the opportunity here in Longmont. However, unlike a private company that would be looking to make a profit in a fairly short-term period, a municipal utility's objective is to provide outstanding value to the community while only covering our costs. The most significant benefits to our community regarding economic development, improvement in education, and quality of life issues are not quantified or even really considered in this particular analysis tonight. And that's a part of our due diligence to ensure that the standalone fiscal viability of the broadband utility providing the proposed community service. So tonight, you know, after you've had the opportunity to ask questions and hear what we have to say, we really want to get your direction. If you like what you hear and you want us to continue to move forward with, you know, working towards building this citywide network, let us know that. Direct us to continue. Direct the city's finance director to bring back detail regarding financing options. And if that, by the way, if that is the decision tonight, Susan Weisskopf, LPC's business manager, will provide some high-level discussion of some of our options with the intent that we'll eventually come back with more detail. Obviously, if you're not comfortable with it, we need to hear that as well. If you want us to change direction, if you want to stop, you know, let us know, and we'll be prepared to do that as well. So unless there's any other questions at this point, I'm going to ask Vince to kick us off. All right.
Mayor Combs, Mayor Pro Tem Santos, council members, Vince Jordan, Broadband Services Manager for Longmont Power and Communications. I'm so excited to be here tonight. It's been a long road. I think we were up here 8 months ago before you with an ordinance to get rates set so that we could provide services in this community. And at that time, you directed staff to reach out to the business community and to the residential community and get their feedback on this plan and what we were thinking about doing. And I can stand before you tonight and tell you that we've literally had hundreds of conversations with businesses and residents about this gigabit network. You've heard from some of them tonight, some of them very eloquently done. There is great enthusiasm for this, and it really boils down to 3 elements: economic development, education, and lifestyle. In terms of economic development, again, I've spoken with literally hundreds of businesses here. You'd be surprised at how challenging it is in this town, in Longmont, with the carriers and the competition that are already here, for businesses to get the bandwidth that they need to do the job that they want to do. In fact, just today, we hooked up a business. We've got them online who are going to have to leave after 3 seasons here in Longmont because they could not operate efficiently in what they do. They do photography for warehousing for sporting goods, and they do massive uploads of files all summer long for these. And they were going to have to get out of here because all they could get until we showed up was a 1.5 meg connection in the area that they're at. And they're not off on the edge of town either. They're in the middle of town. Not on Main Street, but over on Sunset and Nelson. So we hear stories over and over like that of businesses that are looking to get the level of connectivity they need to be effective. We got hold of another one today, the data storage company that needs a higher level of connectivity. On the education side, we've spoken a lot with St. Vrain Valley School District and their intent for the future and what they want to do. Mr. Mayor, you saw last night at the Silver Creek Leadership Academy presentation what these kids are doing, and I mean, it's fantastic what the students in this community are doing, and they are really pushing the edge of the envelope with their thought processes and with the projects that they're after, and they use a lot of bandwidth. And the school district intends to put more and more technology in their hands, and when you put technology like this in students' hands, they use it. And this is all about connectivity. This is all about data coming down and data being created and sent back up as well. And then there's a lifestyle piece of it as well. This is a very high-tech community, as you well know. And the folks that live here and work here, when they go home at night, they don't really shut off. If they shut off from work, they go on to their projects that, again, require a lot of connectivity. And if they got a household of teenagers, then they're really challenged. I wanted to share with you very quickly, we did a little canvas of the types of speeds that you can readily get in Longmont here. And I thought, if I can get my technology to cooperate with me, which I'm sure it will, I'd like to share a couple of things with you real quick here. Let's see. This is from my neighbor's house. I hope it's up on your screen or I'll replay it. This is from my neighbor's house who has DSL at home. And so you can see I ran the speed test tonight from there. So 1.32 megabytes down and 70 meg up. And then for mine, I have a cable connection, and so you'll see it's quite a bit better, actually. Yeah, it's not too bad. I mean, it's you see pretty good download speeds. You'll see the upload speeds are quite a bit less, I believe, after it gets done. There we go. Yep. And it's interesting in talking with the businesses and the residents and the schools, upload speed has become as important to the community as the download speeds. We're creating more and more content and sending more up. I I actually found, somebody had asked about how does this compare, what we're talking about doing compared to the gigabit network that Google's putting in. And I found a speed test. Found a speed test online of the gig. This is at the kiosk in Kansas City, and you'll see they're going to use the same technology, I think. There we go. To run the speed test. So this is in Kansas City. This is Google's kiosk there, hooked to their fiber network. So it'll give you an idea how they're doing. That's pretty nice.
It's like redlining.
Yeah. I'm a little surprised the upload speed. I know there's a whole lot of people in the audience here going, 40 meg up, I'd take it all day long. So as you know, for quite a while now, the chamber here has been on the city fiber network. And so I thought for comparison, I'll just do one live real quick and we'll see how that goes. This is a part, you know, when you're doing a software demonstration, everything falls apart on you. Oh, I did one earlier.
Nice advertisement for Xfinity.
Yeah, I know. Oh, yeah. Take that, Google.
What is that, 7th gear?
No, I think that's the overdrive on 9th gear there. It's still trying to figure out. I think it's trying to hit 400, but.
330.
And that's the upload speeds I'm looking for. So, not too bad. I think we're doing a pretty good job here so far with what we've got put in place. In talking with, in speaking with the community, I've had lots of interesting conversations. I've had conversations with, just recently, with an avowed libertarian. And he told me he voted no against this, and he doesn't think government should be doing this. Why are we doing this? The private sector will take care of it, and. And it was interesting. It was a really interesting conversation. I said, you know, but the private sector is not going to do this. And what you're seeing across the country is there's only a couple of companies, AT&T and Verizon, that actually have some initiative to build out fiber networks across the United States. So it is competition, but at the same time, we're not competing with somebody else who's going to do this because they are not going to put this in place. And I do want to point out also, when I showed that gentleman the type of services that we were going to provide at the speeds we were providing, he asked me for a quote. I wanted to know when he would be able to get signed up, which I found to be quite lovely. Longmont is, you know, as Director Otis said earlier, Longmont in 1997 was at the tip of the spear. When we first started down this road and put this network in place, we were definitely leaders. We were definitely pioneers. But that's changed now, and I want to share one other thing with you here. You know, now you have to wait for the web to respond. Today, there are just under 400 municipalities who are providing some level of broadband service. A number of these are cable networks. A good deal of these are fiber networks. Where you see the little G mark, those are gigabit networks. You'll notice that Longmont's got a pretty nice foothold here in the Rocky Mountain region with the only gigabit network west of the Rockies there. But you're not alone. We're not alone. There are municipalities all over the country that are doing this. And we want to introduce to you tonight two gentlemen who have worked with over 50 of these municipalities in bringing these broadband networks to fruition. So I'd like to, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Uptown Services. Uptown is in its 14th year of providing broadband consulting to municipalities and electric utilities. Uptown Services provides leading-edge consulting, engineering, and implementation support services to municipalities and utilities considering entering or operating in the broadband service sector. Their services and expertise cover the full potential of this industry, including local telephony, video entertainment, high-speed internet access, and smart grid. As a firm, Uptown was founded in 1997 and has been serving the needs of municipal utilities since 1999. And so I'd like to ask Neil Shaw and Dave Stockton to come on down and tell you a little bit more about their background, and then we'll get right into the presentation this evening.
Thank you, Vince. I'm Neil Shaw, and before we get into the results of the feasibility study, I would like to spend a little bit more time talking about Uptown Services, our background, just in the interest of showing that we are qualified and have the experience to speak on these topics.
Wait.
There we go. And that's my forward backwards. Okay. So, like Vince said, we were born in 1997 too, so this is our 17th year of operation as an engineering and consulting firm. And I'm a founder. I bring over 26 years of experience in the telecommunications business, working at companies like US West, Jones International, TCI, and then forming Uptown. My areas of expertise are in engineering and technology and financial areas, as well as process analysis. My partner, Dave Stockton, joined Uptown in 2003, and we have very similar backgrounds. He brings over 28 years of experience in the industry, coming out of US West and then into Media One and AT&T Broadband, in the key areas of product development, sales, operations in phone, cable TV, and high-speed internet businesses. As Vince said, we've worked with a number of municipal and smart grid clients, ranging on the very small side to 3,500 households, all the way up to clients like the city of Portland, Oregon, who has 250,000 households. In that work, we've done 40 feasibility studies, 40 plus, for the municipal and electric broadband clients. And as part of that work, we've had the opportunity to complete a number, 22 and counting, quantitative market research studies. So you'll see that experience coming through in the form of benchmarking and giving you an opportunity to see how you stack up, your results stack up against other studies that we've done quantitatively. The other piece that we've had an opportunity to do is follow through post-feasibility study, or even joining after the feasibility study is complete, an implementation of a fiber-to-the-premise network. And so we've done that for a number of clients, and all of those have been public power or municipally owned utilities. And then as an add-on to that, we've served as strategic advisors and tacticians for several systems that have been in business for a very long time or longer time. And they're either doing really well and they just want some fresh eyes on their business to give them new ideas, or they're in a situation where they may be experiencing some issues and they want a little bit of turnaround consulting. So, and then finally on the design and engineering side, we've actually designed 4 full-blown fiber-to-the-premise systems covering 700 miles of outside plant and 53,000 homes and businesses. So the takeaway here is that while we're here presenting kind of in an academic type mode around the results of your feasibility study, what we're able to do is we're able to feed back this on the ground and very detailed implementation and engineering experience into your study and into our other clients' studies, so that we mix in the best of both worlds in our study process. So what Dave and I are going to talk about tonight is a summary of I believe our final product was over 120 slides. We'll spare you the details to that level, but we've boiled it down to things we think that are most critical to show you tonight, which would be technology strategy, talking about the research survey, which is usually very interesting. There was those results, and then that transitions into the services strategy and the competitive environment analysis. and then I'll come back and do the financial analysis, which will pull it all together. So this business is so tied into technology that a lot of times we miss what the customers are really looking for. But in this case, technology is king, and so you look at why fiber to the premise, okay, or FTTP. Well, very simply, it's the best out there, and it will be for a very long time. So FTTP is the gold standard, and as a technology, there's nothing out there that is superior to it, including wireless and anything else that's in the market. I'm not going to talk a lot about different acronyms and things like that, other than to say that the technology that we're recommending and the technology that you will be deploying, if you move forward, will be a gigabit passive optical network, or GPON. So that's the if I use another acronym the rest of the night, you can throw something at me. But that's basically the limit of the technology discussion at this level of detail. One of the things that we look for when we do a feasibility study is what type of environment are we coming into relative to infrastructure? What does the client or what does the utility have in the way of existing assets that will be useful if you move forward with the full-blown deployment? So in your case, we looked at the fiber backbone. So let's start with that. The fiber backbone is a real jewel in that you've got 17 miles of cable and you've got lots of available fiber. The backbone connects a number of strategic facilities all over the city and utility assets such as substations. The other nice thing about the backbone is the way it was engineered. There's lots of splice points. There's lots of slack loops, which gives you the capability and flexibility to tap into that network much easier than what you might if those weren't there to begin with. And then, of course, you have access to smaller size laterals, albeit with fewer spare fibers in the network. So what equipment is connected to that backbone? Well, you've got some network equipment throughout the city. ETS is using it and utilities using it. And so we looked at that. So you've got core equipment here and at the service center. And of course, you have an internet connection to level 3 at this time. So all of this means that as far as what does it mean to fiber to the premise if you were to deploy? Well, the backbone is central to that deployment strategy. Because it can use to interconnect strategic equipment locations. But as far as network equipment, that is something that you'll definitely need to, and we have budgeted for incremental augments and upgrades of that equipment. But bottom line, the network is your network today is very well positioned to take on fiber to the premise. This is just a quick map to show the backbone and all the other fiber facilities that are presently in Longmont. And this is a representation of a high-level architecture that might be deployed if you were to use key substations and this facility in the service center as key launching points for major equipment that you would use in the fiber to the premise architecture, with the backbone as interconnecting facilities. So one of the things that we do as part of our feasibility study is sample designs. And without getting into too much of the details, I really want to impress on you that, and you'll find later in the financial analysis, that when you look at the cost, the capital structure of this type of a project, the outside plant component of the capital structure is very large. And so being an engineering firm and having implemented a number of these projects through to fruition and seen some projects that didn't go so well that we weren't involved with, we want to make sure that the budget is right where we need it to be relative to outside plant construction. So we, as part of the feasibility study, actually go out and design sample designs in sample neighborhoods. And so I'm just going to show you some of the results there. What we do is we try and characterize, we try and pick areas of a community that will represent the types of outside plant that would be in the entire network. So we look at how much overhead plant you have, how much underground plant you have, multiple dwelling units, single families, and then we try and come up with some areas that would be representative of that mix. And so we picked, by the time we were done with the sample design process, we went a little overboard here, but we did 7 neighborhood designs that pass close to 1,700 homes in this process. And then we also looked at the hub sites and where the different piece parts of the architecture where the building blocks would go. And we used conservative assumptions in the process. So the 7 areas we picked, we've got 3 neighborhoods south of Pike Road. And those are underground. Those are part of the initial project that didn't come to fruition. But it has spare duct in there for fiber. So we wanted to understand, okay, what would that be like to build, and how much money are we saving there? Then we looked at the overhead areas just west of downtown, between 3rd and 9th Avenue. A couple neighborhoods there, and those would be sample high-density overhead. You don't have a lot of overhead in town, so we wanted to make sure we picked something that was representative. And then we looked at your standard underground neighborhoods, front lot, easement, up by Skyline High School. Okay. And then we went through and we actually laid out all the drops to the homes. We looked at where the vaults would go, where the closures would go, and then connected all those vaults and closures with the right size cables, and then the right cabinets, and then connected them with feeder. And we priced all of it out through a straight bill of materials for each of these 7 design areas, and then came up with a sample with the design metrics, densities, miles of plant, all these things. And then came up with the number of how much it would cost to build it per home pass for labor and materials. And so we did this for all 7 areas. So this is one of the overhead areas. I know these are hard to see on the screens, and then this is one of the underground areas up by Skyline. So now we've got, in the sample design process, now we have these underground areas, these underground overhead areas that we've designed, and we've got a per passing cost for each one. Now, whenever you develop a weighted average cost, you need to develop your weightings. And so those weightings are developed based on what are the characteristics of Longmont? How much overhead, how much underground, how much single family, how much multiple dwelling, how much residential, how much commercial. So we're slicing and dicing in multiple dimensions. And at the end of the day, we come up with the weighting for all the sample design areas. You threw in multiple dwelling unit areas as well with estimated build costs for that, and we come up with the weighted average cost per passing. And what that boils down to is how we come up with the capital budget to build out the system from an outside plant perspective. You probably have a good idea of how much the bond is, and if the bond is X and the outside plant portion is 25.6 million, this is a large portion of it. So that's why we spent so much time on this, and we wanted to impart the process and the detail so that you were comfortable with that amount of analysis. So that's a brief overview of the technology. I'll come back and discuss the financials. I'm going to turn it over to my partner next, but I want to take any questions on the technology. If you have any, I'd be happy to take them. Yes, sir.
Quick question. Okay, you've come up with weighted average depending on whether it was underground or overhead. Like underground, there's obviously more expensive, so that's kind of a weight of 18%. But is this ensemble weight then of these 7 neighborhoods plus or 9 neighborhoods? Is that going to reflect the ensemble average of the whole city? You think pretty relevant?
Yeah, because when we went back, I worked with Bill Wiggins in the LPC GIS department, and we spent a lot of time. This is all based on geospatial analysis of each parcel and each building in the city.
Okay.
So I'm comfortable that we were able to characterize and come up with the weightings based on that.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Levison.
Yes, just really a couple of basic definitions, if you don't mind. Sure. What's a passing? Can you give me a definition of a passing?
A passing is a home or business, and it's like if you go buy a duplex, that would be 2 passings because that's 2 residential. Okay, it's kind of like a meter, electric meter. Water meter maybe doesn't work all the time because they have group meters, but electric meter, you typically have a meter for every home and business.
So that's the name of the unit.
It's an industry term for.
Okay. All right. I wasn't familiar with that term, and it's too bad you didn't pick my house a few blocks from here, because my husband would be way too excited about how much work he could do. Shh, don't tell him.
Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Coons.
I'm glad you're here. I'm glad that you've taken the time to do such a good job. But I would like to know what's been your worst experience with municipal networks and what's been your best? And what have you learned from the worst that can help us avoid those pitfalls? That's my first question.
Can I change the names to protect the innocent?
Yes, you may.
I think that where these types of deployments get in trouble is that they maybe are too optimistic on timelines and budgets. And so, and I'm not saying that's the case here. I mean, we've lived through projects like that, and we don't want to do that again. So, but when you ask about that type of experience, that's happened in the past, and business structure. So.
And what have you done to make sure that we're not going to fall into that?
We've stuck to our guns on a lot of things that may not be popular opinions, but it's something that you really, as an independent consultant, we need to tell it like it is, and so sometimes that's not easy to tell a client something they didn't want to hear. And so, so that's what we do to protect our client, protect our interests. I think that one of the things that we're seeing that, and it was mentioned earlier tonight, is the business structure. There is a lot of discussion around a business structure called open access or public-private partnership, where the local community or the utility builds the network and then invites other people in to use it and offer services off that network. In practice, that has not worked anywhere on a large scale, yet people will continue to try and push that. Why, I'm not sure. I mean, politically it sounds great. I mean, everyone wins except when it comes time to pay the bond, and retail providers have exited the business because for whatever reason. And that's the problem. That's what happened in Provo, and that's where they are. And at that point, that was one of those situations where you say, what do you do to keep we couldn't keep them from going wholesale, and that was the situation that they got, that was an issue.
I believe they sold it for $1 to Google.
Yes.
So if we have to sell ours, will it be more than $1?
Hopefully you'll get more than $1. Maybe
And in
$1.50,
Kansas City, where Google has been, as we've shown tonight, they do fiber hoods. Have you guys taken a look at that model?
Yeah, we've recommended that approach when we're in a tactical mode. That's really something that if you do decide to move forward and deploy, that may be a marketing tactic that you choose to go with, to get higher penetration as you move forward, and pick the areas that are going to give you the biggest return early on. So that's definitely still an arrow you want in your quiver going forward.
And in the plan, I'm sure maybe this will be answered later on and somehow I missed it. What is the plan to keep up with future technology and the innovation in the private industry? What will keep us competitive?
Well, you always have to make sure you have enough cash flow in your budget to fund technology upgrades. We have 2 major technology upgrades in our plan, and I'll talk about that. One in year 7 and one in year 10. It totals up to $4.5 million. And there's continual capital infusions in the business. For what, we're not exactly sure, but you need to make sure you have that headroom on your cash flows to make sure that you can keep up with technology. Because it is changing. One of the nice things about putting in an all-fiber network is that the $25 million doesn't include any electronics. And so the $25 million you are not going to be reinvesting in 10 years or 15 years, because you're just going to be upgrading the stuff that goes on each end of the fiber. And that's the beauty of fiber, is that, as opposed to wireless, you can put billions and billions of bits of information down one strand of fiber that you would be challenged to do in all of the spectrum available around around your environment. So, and you can put hundreds of fibers in the ground next to each other.
Councilmember Baldwin. Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I guess I've got a couple concerns, and I've had the opportunity in my life to see a lot of startups and large successful companies start projects, and we ignore the data. And I don't know a lot about these numbers. I have no idea what they mean. It's a foreign language to me. I'm not savvy. Didn't really pay attention because I just don't know. You might as well be putting up Chinese characters. But what I hear time and time again, we were at the retreat, and there was an expert who came in and talked to us about the economy and whatnot. And I remember he made a comment about how communities just can't do this. And everybody in the room, council, and yes, we can. You don't know. And I remember thinking, we haven't done it, And so I had the opportunity once to undertake a creative endeavor that nobody succeeds at, and I thought I could because it was me. And now I understand why nobody succeeds at it. And so I'm sitting here thinking, and we're all gung-ho. Everybody that I've talked to, I see his face, I see his face, I see our faces, my own face in the mirror. I hear the consultants, but why are we different? I have great faith in Vince and Tom, but they've never done it. Your consultants, you might have been on the team and talked about it, but you've never done it. And Provo, I'm sure, I lived in Provo for 4 years. I don't like Provo, but I'm sure their city council is just as smart and as competent as we are. I'm sure their utility people are just as educated. So I want this, but I challenge and push back. What evidence is there that we are different than anyone else? Because I don't see anybody in Longmont that's done this and succeeded, that has the expertise to do it. That is my first question. And I'm sure, I just want, show me the data that shows that we are different. How are we stronger, faster, smarter than all these other municipalities that have failed? And then I have another question.
Well, hopefully you're different than the municipalities that failed because there's so many who have succeeded. Just like Vince said, there's 400 out there offering some form of service today. And there's probably, I don't know how many are offering fiber to the home services, but so there's 100 out there. So what's critical is you understand and you understand the risk factors involved in going forward financially.
It's what we're proposing, going back to Provo, and that's why, from the alley here, I mentioned the business structure, but Provo used a wholesale model. They had to. The state law was changed. So a similar tactic as to what happened here, where as they were considering building that network back in 1999, 1998, incumbents got involved with lobbyists and changed the state law. They removed the ability for that system to retail service. We're talking here about retailing service for broadband, and as we get into the details and continue the discussion, we'll show you that we're talking about partnering with a voice provider for that service. But the structure there was open access, wholesale only, and that has not been the model for success in municipal broadband. So we're not certainly here standing before you saying this is going to be a different model. This model has been used in dozens of municipals across the country successfully. There are some examples of failure. Provo is one of them, but you can see specific reasons. Typically, it's either technical in nature, where they got onto the bleeding edge of some technology. The GPON standard is a standard. That's not the case. Or it's the business structure issue, and that's the issue that Provo had. So,
Councilmember Santos. Thank you, Mayor. Well, and just to remind members of council and the public, this was voted on in 2009 and defeated. 2011, it succeeded. The next day, people were already asking, when is this going to be opened up? And somebody's nodding their head, yeah, we wanted it the next day. And what the opposition was saying was, you don't have a business plan. You don't have a business plan. We needed to establish the right first,
and then now we're talking about the business plan now. You know, I'm not looking to rush into anything. That's why it's taken us until almost 2 years. It'll be 2 years in November that we were able to reestablish the right to offer a service. What that service and how it entails, whether it's the city of Longmont doing it, whether it's with a partner, which you said hasn't succeeded before, and you know that's how I had always envisioned that we would have some sort of another business partner to come in. Unfortunately, that hasn't. As many third-party individuals who I've talked to, and some of them in this room, has been shrugged off or just, no, we're not interested, just go away. You know, I've always thought about it. I'll just get off council and open up Santos Internet and just do it, you know, find some backers and do it myself, but that's not going to happen either. But it's, you know, I don't think anyone, I've served on 3 councils, and they've all been different. And each of those councils have been at least unanimous. 2 of those councils, and this one remains to be seen, 2 of those councils, very diverse councils, had been unanimous in establishing this right back, because it was best for what's Longmont. It was interesting in 2011 to see, whereas partisan politics can sometimes get into nonpartisan elections, this was one that bridged the gap and was very overwhelming to see Republicans and Democrats come together and independents and say, this is what's best for Longmont. So I'm actually glad to see that we're having this discussion, how we go forward, and I'm looking forward to seeing, you know, hearing the next presentation. But you know, to say that we're going to be different than any other city, again, there's always risk involved, whether you're redeveloping a mall, whether you're adding a new building on Longs Peak and Main Street, whether you're building, you know, trying to build a new park at Dry Creek, or whether you're looking at whether you're going to have a new city manager. I mean, they're all risks. They're all calculated risks. You just got to try to see if you can make the good one. Like with Harold, we made a very good calculated risk. I'm very pleased with. So,
Councilman Bagley.
I guess I want to vote for this. You know, I mean, I was for it. The things that come to mind is Mr. Whipple was right. You know, the odds while we were talking about this was presented as private-public partnership, that this will allow people to come in, a private entity to partner with the city. This is very different than what I remember. And yeah, it's very different than what I remember. And somebody on council just whispered, nobody's interested. Well, it's only been a couple months.
No, it hasn't.
The next question I have is, what I would feel comfortable with is, I want to hear all the ways this could go wrong. That would help me understand that we've really looked at how this could blow up in our face. Because we're spending money on a mall, we're trying to redo the budget. I just want to know how this can go wrong. Because at the end, as I look at the graphs of all the fiber going through all the city, I just don't want to be the guy holding the bag.
Yeah, we actually, in the last part of our presentation, we're going to go through the financials, and we actually, with our model, have a sensitivity analysis assessment. It's basically looking at risk. So it's exactly what you're talking about, where we use the model to identify the most sensitive aspects of your business case. And so we'll identify the risks and what those are, and we show you the downside potential and how well the business case stands up to some things going wrong. And we'll do that in specific detail. Mr. Mayor, council members, would it be okay if I proceed?
Sure, yeah. I was going to suggest that we see the whole presentation and then, okay, Councilman Santos.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Bagley, this hasn't been months of talking with other providers, regardless of what members of the public have said. This has been a process. As far as I've been on council, we've been discussing this since 2008, and then talking to whether it was CenturyLink, Comcast, or other providers about partnering with and Tom, please correct me if I'm wrong, talking to them about whether they would like to come in and be a partner. My theory was, we have this, come in, you have all the customer service and all the people that can come in and do all the grunt work. You lease it from us and cut us a check. That was what I always thought, but apparently no one was interested. That's been going on for the last 5 years.
Actually, Mayor Combs, Councilmember Santos, it's been going on for 16 years. When we first started the project, it really, council probably talked about it back in '97, and the preference at that time was to try to get a private partner that would actually finance this effort. And like I said in my opening comments, after 3 years of trying, and we discussed it with, and this was actually before my time here, it'd been discussed with incumbent providers as well as other outside telecommunication companies. Finally, in 2001, did step up to the plate, but they never completed the job. Since that time, we've talked to many telecommunication companies. Some of them, we had to sign confidentiality agreements, and we still talk to them today. But the point is, 16 years, nobody's come with a bag of money. We can keep waiting, or we can talk about doing it on our own, like hundreds of other communities have already done and been successful at doing. And I think that, if there is one advantage of waiting the 16 years, it's the fact that we're going to learn from others' mistakes, and we're going to learn from others' successes. And myself, as well as Vince, have been out personally to talk to, for example, Chattanooga, Tennessee, who's been highly successful in deploying this. There's Lafayette, Louisiana, that's been doing it for at least 10 years. There's Bristol, Virginia. You could probably continue on.
Also North Carolina.
Sure,
and that's where we're at today.
Sure, and the point I'm trying to make is that this, talking to other third-party providers, just hasn't been a couple of months. I can recall a meeting that you and I had with Comcast over in your offices at least 2 years ago. And then I can also recall a meeting with CenturyLink just several months ago. So this isn't just something that has, and then with CenturyLink at least 3 years ago. Again, this has been a continuing discussion.
Yeah, and we've heard this discussion many times before. So Wilson, North Carolina's example, they were talking to one incumbent for a year, and really at the end of the day, they figured out they were just trying to stall the project and keep it going. The issue for the incumbents is this technology and approach is not profit maximizing for them. It's not. I think it was mentioned earlier that this really is about economic development and putting infrastructure in for the community as opposed to profit maximization. And that's why it's something that they don't do. So.
Okay. Well, I'd like to suggest that you can continue and we just hold all of our questions to the end and you just make notes if you have on different slides, if you have, and then we can come back at the end and come back to.
Can I jump in? We have breaks actually built in for questions.
Okay. All right.
Because this is a pretty lengthy presentation and we actually have gone through it. And so we actually have breaks built in.
Okay.
So you can ask your questions so we don't get too far down the road.
All right.
I would also like to add another piece of information. I think we've also indicated we're still willing to talk to folks and evaluate different options. The consultant that Councilmember Bagley mentioned that talked during the study session actually has followed up with some phone calls with us and has said, I think you're really onto something. Here's a chief information officer that I'd like for you to talk to that's actually lives in Boulder and in Massachusetts, splits time. And so anyway, we're trying to have those conversations. I think the key point is also to really evaluate those conversations and make sure that whether it's a partnership or whether it's not a partnership is to make sure that we're protecting ourselves in that scenario and really understanding what are the risks associated with this. And more importantly, looking at what are the unintended consequences, because that's where we really have to spend a lot of our time is absolutely assessing the risk and the unintended consequences, because that's typically what will jump up and bite us in terms of whether or not this will be successful. So wanted to say we're still talking to folks, but at the same point, we need to be really careful and make sure that we're protecting our interests, because sometimes partnerships can not work out in a community's best interest. So we're really vetting those as we have conversations, but we're still open to discussions.
All right, continue, please.
Okay, I will. Thank you. All right. Well, I appreciate being here tonight. I'm going to cover the next two sections with you, and that would involve the market research as well as kind of the service strategy. So we'll talk about the products. And all that's really intended to build the revenue picture that then is pulled into the financial analysis and the business case. And that's going to be the fourth piece. And Neil's going to come back up and go through the financials with you on that. So let's start with the market research. This was a 400 sample quantitative phone survey. We used a phone survey. It's higher quality. It has the least amount of bias as opposed to online surveys or mail surveys. And we used a professional market research firm out of Atlanta called Pioneer Marketing Research to conduct the survey. We've been using them for the past 10 years. So they've done over 20 studies for us. They serve the Fortune 500 sector. Very reputable firm and high quality work. Like I said, the total sample is 400. We selected that number to achieve what's called a 95% confidence interval. It's a lower error term, less than plus or minus 5%. And then we used a number of techniques that are industry standard, if you will, in market research to make sure that the quality of the data that we got back was valid. And one of those is we did quota age deciles for the survey. So we made sure we had representation of each age group in the survey with a minimum sample for each age decile. And then we weighted those age deciles based on your 2010 census results to directly reflect the universe and took the data back to be very representative then of the entire town. And then we did screening as well. We made sure we were talking to the telecommunications decider in the home, and we screened out anyone who would be biased by affiliation of employment. Okay. So I'll go through the results. We'll start with just looking at what people are doing today, starting with internet. People are very much using broadband today. As you can see, did not find any dial-up. There are a few homes, about 8% of homes today either do not have a PC or are not using internet. The rest, 92%, are using broadband. Cable modem and DSL, which would be the two largest incumbents, have the vast majority of market share at 95%. There are some other ancillary technologies that can provide internet like satellite, but that's really not what's being used in Longmont here today. Internet service in terms of spending about $44 per household per month. And you can see there on the bottom chart, you can see the market share breakout. Comcast has the majority market share. That's reflective of national average as well, where cable modem has more market share than DSL. And you can see that 52%, CenturyLink's 40%. In terms of phone, what's happened is, as many of you are aware, is that cellular, over the last 5 years especially, has become a substitute service for your wireline home phone. So today in Longmont, almost 1 in 2 homes no longer has a wireline telephone line. They're using their cell phone as their only phone for home use. And that will continue to move forward that way. And we look at this, it's important, as we look at the projections in our business case, we're actually eroding market share for voice service. We do believe that you should offer voice service over this network, both residential and business. But for the residential segment, not the business, but for residential, that should erode over time, and we are doing that in the business case. Then there's the third aspect, which is video service. And today, if you look at the makeup, I'm looking at that pie chart in the upper right-hand corner. You have about 33% of homes taking cable TV from Comcast. You've got about 35% using DBS, direct broadcast satellite, or DISH. And then you have another roughly third of the market that's not using traditional pay TV anymore. And this is an interesting trend that is growing over time, primarily doing one of two things. Some just don't have TV, and that would be the 4%. But the rest, you've got some that are using off-air service. So put an antenna up, they're getting the broadcast channels only, they're not getting cable channels, and they're getting that for free because it's over the air, of course. It's about 14%. You also have another 14% that are taking content, what's called over-the-top, OTT, and that's basically doing your video viewing online using Netflix, Hulu Plus, Amazon, et cetera, of a number of services that are out there where you can effectively, quote, watch TV on your iPad, your computer, even your TV if you stream it to your TV or other device. And that's an emerging segment. And then you can see the spending as well. Now, this emerging video trend with over the top is interesting. It's happening pretty quickly. And if you look at up on the upper right-hand corner, just the number of homes that have tried it, it's about half that have used it at some point in time. But you have now, of course, 14% that are using it exclusively instead of pay TV, plus the 14% that are using off-air. And if you look in the lower left-hand corner, you can see the trend being affected by age and what's coming over time. The off-air is in the red, so you can see by age decile the percent of homes that are using off-air and not pay TV. It moves around a little bit, but it's pretty stable over the age group. That's very different from what's happening with online viewing and streaming. There you can clearly see that this trend is being driven by younger households. So we expect this to go up over time, and you see the pay TV category rapidly changing with this trend moving forward. And this is coming up because it's one of the things we looked at and considered on whether or not video or cable TV service should be included in the business case. Our recommendation and the financials that we're showing you tonight do not have it in, and this is the main reason why. We don't think that over time this is a strong category to be in and invest money in. The other aspect of that is bundling. So we also asked to the extent people are bundling or getting all three services from a single provider in the survey. And in part, we knew about that video question, so we wanted to explore that. And it turns out that only 1 in 5 homes today in Longmont are actually taking all three services from a single provider. And that's declining now. Part of that decline is the fact that people are now using cellular. They're dropping their wireline phone. But also part of it is what's happening with video and this emerging trend. So we don't see bundling as being critical or having all three services. In our view, we feel that video is something that is optional and does not need to be included. The next part of the research gets into satisfaction. So we looked at that. These are satisfaction ratings for the major incumbent providers, including the electric service here today. So this is the mean rating of all respondents on a scale of 1 to 10. And you can see their range. Non-pay TV, it's cheap, but that's the lowest rating, so I guess you get what you pay for. But you can see DSL, cable modem at about 6.6, 7 mean rating, electric at 8.6. Another interesting way to look at this is to say what percent of these providers' customer bases are really satisfied with the service, rating it a 9 or a 10. And if you look at that, that's the graph below. So you see cable TV, about 1 in 5 are really satisfied and happy with the service. And you can see the numbers are fairly low. Electric would be the exception to that trend. And these are pretty typical numbers. This next slide here benchmarks those results to, as Neil mentioned, about 20 market surveys that we've done over the years in different parts of the country. And the sliding scale that you see for each service represents the range of satisfaction scores that have been output from those surveys. And then the triangle indicates where Longmont came in this market for satisfaction. So telephone came in very low. That was previously out of range. And you can see internet, DSL, and cable modem are on the low end as well. Pay TV is in the middle. The utility, which usually is the electric, sometimes we've had clients that were water, so that's why we just say utility, ranges a little bit on the higher side. Again, we looked at attribute importance. We wanted to check a service bundle, and we also wanted to look at internet speed. So we asked respondents to rate the importance of the main attributes of broadband service on a scale of 1 to 5. And you can see internet speed 4.4. Basically as important as customer service and price. Extremely important. Now, I can tell you that 5 years ago when we were doing this, there was a gap between internet speed and those other two attributes like price. Reliability is always number one. And then you can see bundling, a distant, fourth or whatever, very much separate from the importance of these other attributes. So again, that kind of gives us some assurance that bundling is not critical in having all three services. Vince, in the demonstration on internet, showed you both upload and download. We asked about that in the survey. So we asked what aspect of internet service is most important. And this is another one of those questions. This is changing quickly now relative to where these answers were 3 years ago or 5 years ago. It used to be all about download. That's what people knew. That really has changed. As you can see now, 60% are saying both are important. And we think that will continue to change now, where it won't be so long in the future where symmetrical is going to be expected and highly desired and valued in terms of a dimension of evaluating the value of broadband service. And then we asked about the importance to the local economy. Again, residential, just the perspective of your household customer in Longmont, and SKU, very important. So people get it. I think they understand it's the infrastructure of today, and people find it important, even from a more macroeconomic perspective. The next section gets into purchase intent. So one of the most important things we're trying to get out of the research is we want to understand what the take rate would be if, in fact, you offered these services. So obviously that's very important to having an accurate business case from a revenue standpoint. And so we use a fair amount of science to get that. What we ask is we reference to an incumbent service. We use an actual percentage price point comparison, so we compared at 10% less. That's important to do that. And we don't use a nominal price because people sometimes have a misunderstanding. You can state a price and maybe someone thinks it's different than what you're saying. So we use a price percentage. And then the options for response are I definitely would subscribe. I probably would. I might not. I probably would not. And I definitely would not. And that's called a 5-point Likert scale. Likert's the guy who invented it. And that's a symmetrical response. Again, it's a standard research approach to getting a good purchase intent score. These are the raw responses for each of the 4 services we asked about. We asked about the 3 and home security. So if we look at internet, for example, hard to see numbers, but I think we had 68% of respondents say they would definitely or probably switch to the fiber system for their internet service. Okay, and then you can see the corresponding responses for the other 3. We don't go with that number, though. We do something called overstatement adjustment. This has been around for, I think, 40 years now. It comes out of packaged goods with firms like Procter & Gamble, where they realized empirically over time, when someone says something in research versus when they actually take out their wallet, you need to factor it down. And when you use a 5-point Likert scale, the way you do that is you take 70% of the response value for definitely would, you take only 30% for probably would, and you take only 10% for might not. Conservative approach, but we feel it works. And we've had clients we've done feasibility studies, use this to make their projections. They've deployed, and it's surprising they're very close to hitting the numbers that we said they would. So in your case, when we do the overstatement adjustment, you can see the market research outcome then says for video that would have been 23%, internet 36.4, telephone 19.6, and then home security, you can see it's 7.5. In the business case, we are proposing internet and phone only, so those carry over and at the penetrations you see there. So basically 36% for internet would be the market penetration, and 20% essentially for phone. And like I said, over time we would erode phone, so that would grow to 20% and then slowly erode over time as wireless substitution or cellular substitution continues. And then also for small business, that would be all residential. We have 40% internet, 35% phone. We're basing that on the actual results that we've seen with other municipals. We also asked about provider preference. And this maybe will give you some insight relative to the discussion before I dove into the market research on wholesaling or having other partners come in. We asked who you prefer to provide these services. So the options for the respondents were CenturyLink, Comcast, LPC, or a provider that is new to the area. And of course, you always have some that don't know. Of all respondents, the vast majority, 52%, said LPC. Of those that said they would definitely purchase internet, so these would be the ones who would actually be wanting to connect to this network, that would be 70%. And we've seen this before. And I think, just one comment, we've looked at other business models. I think the model proposing here, in fact, I'd say I know, is now the standard municipal model relative to business structure and who does what, who you partner with, et cetera. But I'd also suggest that you keep in mind just the strength of your brand and the trust that's there, and that shows up in a slide like this when you consider your options in that regard as well. In looking at the achievableness, if you will, of these numbers, what I'm showing here is for internet, the penetration numbers in the business case that Neil will talk about. We give you 5 years to grow to that penetration number that came out of the research. So you can see in month 60, you're hitting 36%, which is where that red triangle is, and you grow up to that over time. And the other lines you see on these charts would be the actual penetration results by month for internet of other municipals that we have some very solid data on, and we're tracking their performance. Got a couple that are a little lower, but you can see very much a trend there, and your projections, we feel, are very much within the trend of what others have already done. You're not inventing the wheel here. This has been done before, and the results can show you that it's achievable. This is the same graph for voice service as well. So again, we're being conservative, and you can see the cellular substitution there. Systems are growing up to around 20% or so, and then kind of getting flat. We got one client in Oklahoma that's dropping off a little too fast, but most of our clients right now, they're holding their ground. But it's not something where we want to erode it in the business case. So to summarize the research survey, we would say that the view of the market, and I think you know this from the vote and some of the comments here this evening, is that bandwidth, both upstream and downstream, is king. It's important to the user and the home, and it's even viewed as important relative to the local economy. We believe that excluding video is a viable strategy. A lot of municipals have done triple play. We're seeing more and more of the clients that we're talking to now and projects we're starting getting involved with. More and more people are feeling very optional on video. They're feeling like broadband really, and the bandwidth is much more important than offering cable TV. So we feel it's undergoing, as you saw, rapid change. So investing a lot just for video might not be the best idea, and we don't think it'll be an issue from a bundling standpoint. We think the research shows, again, as you probably are not surprised because of the vote result, that there is a solid base of community support. There's preference for LPC as a brand, and there's satisfaction that's higher for LPC compared to the incumbents that we looked at. And then finally, we believe the penetration projections that we're putting in the business case are achievable and realistic based on what we've seen before. Okay, I've got a few more slides on the service strategy, so I'd like to move into that. And then Neil will be coming back up. So with that, that gives us grounded in what the market is using. The next step relative to revenue and pulling that into the business case is to look at the two service areas and say, well, what would we offer? What would we bring to the market? And let's start with internet, of course. That's most important. This is what's available in Longmont today by the incumbents. So the two wireline providers are up there. Wild Blue is a satellite provider, so you can get internet from them. They're a national player. And you can see the download and upload speeds and the price points and the kind of technology. There is no other fiber to the premise or fiber to the business technology available today in Longmont. In terms of what we feel you could do and what we've incorporated into the business case is offer 4 tiers, starting at 10 meg up to 100 meg for residential. You can certainly go beyond this. We've had a couple of our clients, Tullahoma, Tennessee, Wilson, North Carolina, in the last 2 months. We did their business cases and helped them get up and running. They've both been, Wilson's been up about 5 years, I think, Tullahoma 3.5. They both announced that they're now gigabit cities in the last 2 months. And so you can do that with GPON technology. In the business case, we're kind of being conservative, if you will, and saying these are the tiers. We identify how many subscribers would fall into each tier, and we're conservative there as well. But these are the price points that would be offered. So $39.95 for 10 meg symmetrical residential connection, and that would be a nice discount and a lot more performance. But that's what we believe would be a good starting point. And then in terms of looking at that and evaluating it, it helps to look at kind of bang for the buck, if you will. So this is a chart. Shows you two things. The red bar is simply the download speed of each tier by provider. So on the far left, we've got Comcast. In the middle, we have CenturyLink. WB is Wild Blue, which is that satellite option, and then OPC, of course. And then the green line shows you the price per meg that's charged to the residential user. And so the lower that is, the better. And you can see that over on LPC, we'd be getting down to some new lows there in terms of the price per meg, and that's exactly what you want to see. And if you look at this relative to other countries, where in our industry we hear a lot about where the U.S. stands compared to other countries, and price of bandwidth and all that, and that's exactly what this is. And to really stimulate the economy, have businesses, local businesses be healthier, you want the price per bandwidth to be as low as possible. Okay, and then another thing I did is I benchmark the pricing that's in your business case to other municipals and what they offer. Same concept though, price per meg. LPC is the orange line you can see there. Again, lower is better, and we're looking very favorable here as well compared to what other municipals are doing. Okay, that's the residential side. Then on commercial, this is what's in the market today. Comcast and CenturyLink, and then again, we'd be looking at 4 tiers or beyond. I think we certainly can go at 500 meg and a gig, and I think that's foreseen. But in terms of the business case, this is where we're placing the subscribers today, and you can see the pricing. And there we'd have a symmetrical option for a few more dollars. And we think, again, this is very competitive. And the easy way to see that is to go back to the price per meg again. And you can see we're getting down to about $1.60 per meg for commercial, which is extremely cost effective compared to what's out there. Okay. Then the other piece of that's kind of regular internet, if you will. And the other piece is with these fiber connections, and some of this is being provided today now, we can really go into a larger business and serve them with dedicated bandwidth, or we can provide point-to-point transport on the network. So there's some really highly valuable services that can be provided, and these kind of describe both of those. The top one would be transport, where we can move data, and a business that maybe has 2 locations in Longmont wants to move data between centers. We can give them very high bandwidth very cost effectively. And then the bottom one would be if a business needs dedicated internet access where that bandwidth is always there, and they want to go really high, we can do that as well. So we've got this in the business case as well as a service that can be provided. And we've got 10 gig plus and 1 gig plus because basically just changing the electronics and how it's configured, how many cards are put in there, we can get up to where we need to on fiber. Okay. And so I won't go into detail on this, but this just summarizes then how in the business case we've split the commercial market for both internet access, which is the regular tiers, and then the 2 high capacity services that I was just talking about. Okay, so those are my slides. I guess I'll open up for questions.
I guess I have a question. These prices, the LPC prices, are they going to, first off, is this wireless service going to, or this fiber service going to have an enterprise fee similar to the electric company? And is it going to be 8% or something different? Or I mean, are these prices here the real prices, or do they get kicked up by the enterprise fee?
Yeah, is the enterprise fee the 5%? Franchise fee, yes. I think right now the intent is that they would be kicked up. So these fees in the business case are the revenues that come into the business case. The franchise fee, normally that's a pass-through fee that would be billed on top of these fees to the customer and then paid back to the city. The comment I would have about that, because we did talk about that during the course of the project, is normally with franchise fees, that 5%, it's common, it's used on cable TV. So normally, when you talk franchise fee in a city collecting franchise fees, that would be for cable TV service. It wouldn't be for internet or voice service, which are the 2 we're talking about. So that's something that you all may want to consider relative to how that's set up and designed and what that does relative to what the end user is paying.
Okay. Councilmember Witt.
Thank you, Mayor. So I think that we've heard a lot of great things of the possibility of how this could roll out and the benefit that it would have on our economy. What I'm seeing, though, is that we are going to have the best product at the lowest price, right? And that's great. But what happens then is that we drive out the competition, and then we are the sole. I could see that we would become the sole provider of internet in Longmont, which may be good or bad. I mean, I think Longmont's the sole provider of electricity and water also in Longmont. I think the concern of some residents is if we breed out any competition in Longmont, are we then going to jack up the rates? Are we going to, if something should happen to our network and potentially strand the residents and businesses with no internet, then the city is going to have to come in with taxpayer dollars and rescue it. So can you give me an example, or has anything like that happened in real life, or is it too soon to tell?
No, we have not seen anyone push out the incumbents. We've been around for quite a while doing this. So the result of this is it enhances competition.
Okay.
So no one has been pushed out, and we've worked with a number of cities that have been launched for a long time across different cable providers, and market share moves around. And you just saw our projections on how the market share moves around, but the incumbents don't leave. They don't leave, and no one gets pushed out of business. So, but what we do think it does is it provides more value to the community. It's an option. No one in the community is forced to take this. It would pass all homes and businesses, but until a business or a home calls up and says, yes, I want it, I'm going to take it, they aren't connected. They're not forced to take it. So, there'll be a certain part of the market that sticks with Comcast, a certain part that would stick with CenturyLink, but the option would be here for this alternative if someone desires to get this kind of service. So, but we just haven't seen that happen where the market dynamic gets weird like that.
All right. So, and probably the oldest municipal internet service providers would be what cities?
I think, they go back about, 10 years and beyond.
Okay.
And there are some examples. There are some municipals that were the first cable TV company. So those aren't good comparisons.
Sure.
But in terms of, coming in and being a next cable TV provider, broadband provider, you're looking at about the last 10 years or so, roughly.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
And Councilmember, I can give you a few examples. I think Lafayette, Louisiana had Cox Cable, and I believe that they're still competing against Cox Cable. Chattanooga, Tennessee had Comcast.
They're still competing.
And Comcast is still providing service in Chattanooga. Bristol.
Wilson, North Carolina is Time Warner. They're still there.
Councilmember Larson.
Thank you. And those are also states, from what research I did maybe 2 years ago, that had heavy influence in the state legislature about passing very high numbers, percentage numbers of percentage of voters you had to get to allow cities to have any kind of right to be a player in this area of utility. And I think in Minnesota, the state legislature, under influence from the industry, passed something that you had to get like 60%, not just 51% like we have in Colorado, and that was something that had inhibited actually options to citizens. So I have a couple of questions regarding your market analysis. When you were looking at the confidence factor, in general, when you were looking at utility confidence, was that electric utilities across the country in general have about a 65% favorability rating, or was that just LPC?
That's just LPC.
Okay, so it was all local. It was all local comparison data.
Yes.
Okay, great. And then I guess one question that I had is that it seems to me there might be even some more separation in the different price points, in that I'm recalling with the breakup of the telephone industry in the 80s, where some people just needed a telephone lifeline service, that they didn't want long distance. They wanted to have some flexibility and options. And I'm seeing this situation as being analogous to that, that there might actually be room at the very low end of the market where there's a price point of even kind of a lifeline service of $29 a month or $19.95 a month, just like there is for a standard telephone service currently.
Right. Yeah, and we do have clients that offer Lifeline service. We've got a couple, and that's certainly an option. And you can have it be means tested, where someone needs to prove that they qualify for Lifeline. And I think the price point there for just that plain line typically is in the $10 to $12 range per month. You know, the model though, and we see the numbers that, you know, they do have a few subscribers to Lifeline, but the numbers are pretty small. The model that we've used and that's standard is to package together the line, the calling features, and unlimited long distance. And that's what we're recommending here. That model works very well. That is a model where a partner, which would be a competitive local exchange carrier that already has the phone switch and the expertise, could work with you. They could wholesale you that service very cost effectively. We've done that a number of times, and that's a very common approach. It saves you a lot of capital of not buying phone switches, and then you can package that in and sell that, and it's a good contribution to paying off the network.
So that's the part when we were speaking, or you were speaking about public-private partnerships. That's an example where there's a segment of the market that seems to be very tailor-made to have that private partner doing phone, because there are certain economies of scale that they have that's not a good endeavor for a utility, a public utility like a municipal utility would be.
Correct. And some municipals have, you know, become their own CLEC, and they buy the switch and they get registered as a competitive provider. That's been done. Chattanooga does that. But again, Chattanooga has 150,000 homes passed. And so it's what you're talking about. You need that scale, because typically between the switch and the fees that you incur to register as a CLEC, you're looking at close to $1 million. So, and again, it's a service where there is some erosion going on, so you have to be careful. So in the last 5 years or so in municipal broadband, this model is the one that's emerged as the favored one, and unless you have a ton of scale, it's definitely the way to go.
Right. Well, and one thing that I did not see in your market penetration studies, frankly, is a lot of people are using smartphones only. And if you look at how people are getting data, and, well, it all depends on what the cellular phone industry is going to do around what they charge for data and what speeds they can offer. Frankly, my dream would be that I wouldn't be paying for a data plan on my cell phone. I'm not going to be paying for, you know, internet access at home. I mean, I can't tell you how many ways we get soaked for internet access. And so when you're talking about phone, you're talking about landline. I think the evolution of the industry may actually be a revolutionary approach where you don't have any fixed base at all. So if you're looking at the worst case scenario, you know, we're going to start a buggy whip factory, and buggies will go out of favor. And so I think that addresses some of Councilmember Bagley's concerns that, you know, and frankly comments we've heard from the industry that you're not going to be able to keep up with the innovation in technology because there's a different mindset that drives that offering.
Yeah, valid point. And it sounds contradictory, but what's going on the voice side is very different from what's happening on the data side. And I think it's a couple things. On data, that there's the pricing restriction that you mentioned. So if you're in a wireless model today, you don't get a lot of bandwidth without going into those usage charges, et cetera. But the other thing that's more important is you just don't get the throughput, the capacity, instant on. It's just a completely different experience from an online standpoint, especially if you're talking about streaming video, and that's what people want to use broadband for more and more. So, you know, we don't, and I know the wireless industry, there's always hope with the next, 4G, the next evolution. It just has not materialized. What we're seeing, all our clients continue to grow their internet penetration. We aren't seeing any substitution happening there. Relative to fiber, and the second part of your question, the electronics can evolve. They will over time, and that's why, as Neil mentioned, we've got capital budget in the plan to upgrade down the road at year 10 and change out electronics. However, having said that, it's important to note that GPON is a standard. It's high volume now. And, you know, the medium that matters, the thing that costs money here, as Neil mentioned, is that outside plant. It's getting that fiber into the ground and in the air and passing every home and business. And that fiber, it's just from a physical standpoint and the qualities that it has, there's nothing that compares. And you know, 50, 100 years, I don't know what the answer is, but it's light. And so what matters there is just the electronics on the end. So we feel very comfortable. We don't think we're the only ones that this kind of technology is the way to go. And as the bandwidth usage goes up, it's not, you know, as far as wireless will advance, the bandwidth usage and how people use the internet is just going to keep staying ahead of it, if not get further ahead.
So, just for full disclosure, one of my brother-in-laws used to work. He worked for Comcast back in the day, but he also worked for another company that went around buying up small cable companies and networks. And so, are there any? I mean, basically, we're creating our own small utility that's just in this certain geographic reason. And so my question is, if in the past, 20 years, there's been all this consolidation, and the consolidation has brought you economies of scale and greater profit, I mean, and how the profit comes in is whether, if they're a monopoly or not, or the, where people can access the services and at cost. I'm just wondering whether or not that there's a viable model in the marketplace of a small provider, and if that model in the private industry is gone, why would the public entity want to go into a model that might be outdated? Financial and business model, I mean, I can't even tell you how many cable systems my brother-in-law bought for companies. So, yeah. So why? I mean, if that model is gone and that's a dinosaur, why would we be, being part of a dinosaur business plan?
Well, it's not a dinosaur business plan. I think that the key difference is, and you mentioned it, is profitability. In the private sector, if your goal is profit maximization, you consolidate, you get scale, and you go for greater profits every quarter. So you're reporting that to Wall Street. That's not the goal here. So we're talking about two different things.
The goal is to not make a profit, but not cost capital.
Right. Yes.
In sustainable offering of services. Okay, got it.
Yep.
Councilmember Santos.
Thank you. It's kind of like every enterprise fund that we have. We're not looking to make a profit, just making sure that it's maintained. In the residential internet pricing scheme, the one thing I don't see is the digital divide pricing. Is that taken into consideration?
Well, what are you looking to see there? What do you want to see?
I'm sorry?
Are you talking about Lifeline? Yeah.
Well, I mean, we have, Comcast, they do, is it $99 for a certain type of bandwidth. They work with the school district. So I was wondering if we would be offering something along those lines in conjunction with the school district if we were to do something like that.
Councilmember Sanders, we certainly can. I mean, I think when they are putting the business model together, that's a real small component of it. This is really the feasibility study for the fiscal viability of the whole of the utility as a whole. But when you guys approved the changes in the ordinance back in November, allowing us to provide services, and there was language that we could give discounts. For example, digital divide type discounts, and it's something that we would certainly work towards. I think if we decided to move forward, provide this service.
Okay, you got something, Karen?
I nailed it.
All right.
The only other thing that I'll say is that looking at the data that you provided, the only thing that I'm interested in, I think you and I and Vince have talked before, would just be the broadband. I'm not interested in the telephone. I'm not interested in the video aspect. If someone else were to come along and say, we'd like to partner with you on that, fine. I think the only thing that I would be interested in, I haven't seen the rest of the presentation, gone through it and read the material, would just be the broadband. If there's a provider out there that would like to partner with us, the door is still open. But if we're going to proceed, that's where I'd like to proceed.
I'd like to recommend that we take a 10-minute recess. We've been going at it for 2 hours now.
All right. All right. Let's start the meeting again, please.
Oh, you do? But the state of
Yeah. All right, let's continue our meeting here so I can get out before midnight.
Who's next?
All right, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so this is the fourth quarter, and this is the final section, and this is to talk about the financial feasibility of the fiber to the premise business case. So what I want to do is go through the level of assumptions that we've used in the business case, talk about just in general the categories that are in there. Not dive too deep into the details given the time and some of it's kind of boring, but I think the most exciting part is getting into the sensitivity analysis, looking at different scenarios, and then getting into a little bit more detail around the detailed financial summary of our recommended case. So when we talk about the outside plant, the capital budget, we talk about how much that takes up of the capital budget. Well, in the operational expense budget, staffing is a major part. This is a staff-intensive business, and we want to make sure that we are staffing appropriately in the business case so you don't come up short-handed when you really need the people. So when we look at the people that are being added, it's really mostly frontline people dealing with customers and dealing with the network. First, on the customer service reps, there's two levels of customer service reps. There's a typical CSR job description, and they're handling all the inbound and office sales, order entry, and tier 1 support for the customers that call in, things that can be handled easily by a frontline person. And then there's a second subset of CSRs called TSRs, or technical service representatives. So this is the more hardcore help desk person that's able to deal with the bits and bytes a little bit more handily, and that probably the 10% issues that take 80% of the time. So those get moved up to them. We've got install technicians. Install technicians are responsible for connecting customers to the network, so running the drop either in the air or under the ground, connecting the drop to the optical network terminal, or ONT, that goes on the side of the house or in the house, and then running all the wiring that's required to hook a customer up. So that's an install technician and what they do. Service technicians will fix trouble from the drop into the home for the customer. And then network technicians are responsible for maintaining the overall fiber ring and all the way out to, but not including the service drop for the customer. They're like an electric lineman for fiber. So when you look at the business plan and the staffing requirements in the business plan, we have a fair number of people being added to the ranks of the broadband group. And these are all dedicated to broadband, either as a partial or full-time equivalent position, or a full FTE, 100%. And what you see here is that we have a crush of activity over the first 3 to 40 years in terms of installs. And so when you see the headcount going up from 23.5 to 36.5 and then dropping to 26.5, the idea there is that you would manage inside contract, in-house contract employees that would be managed by in-house full-time supervisors. So that's a little bit of a higher wire act in terms of how you would pull that off, but the key thing there is that given the cost of bringing in an army of install technicians under someone else's management and the cost of that and what we run into. The majority of our clients have worked as hard as they could to insource that function, if even temporarily. That's the key thing. It's a customer-facing function. You really might need to make sure that it's done exactly correct to your standards, and the best way to do that is for you to manage it. One of the questions we always get is, wow, that it's one of two things. They say, that's no way, is that enough people? Or, man, that's way too many people. And so what we've done is gone back to our old clients and other people that we know that are in this business. They've been in it for a long time, and done some benchmarking against staffing levels. And typically, so what we're looking at is in the broad categories of staff, in terms of shared CSRs, dedicated CSRs and TSRs, technicians and other staff dedicated to broadband, mapping that then against the number of connections, and then doing some benchmarking against that metric. The key thing here is that we're looking at column F is probably the most applicable benchmark number and system. So when you look at column F against the LPC column, which is the last column on the right, they have 409 full-time equivalents, or 409 connections per full-time equivalent, and our business plan calls for 457. So it's within 10 or 15%. And given the fact that Dave took all the suspense out of my presentation by saying we're not doing video, but since you're not doing video, that's probably a reasonable assumption, because video is a very labor-intensive and customer service-intensive business. The other thing I want to do is I want to go fairly quickly through the list of assumptions. The business model has many, many rows, over 1,000. There's probably over 350 inputs in the business model. So I want to give you an idea of the categories of inputs that we use, and some of the inputs that I want to highlight. So basically what we've been able to do here, since broadband is an existing enterprise, is we can look at your budget, we can look at the line items, we can compare that to what you're doing in electric and make sure we're covering off all those line items. And so we've got city services in there modeled on the same order of expense that electric is currently paying, office expenses, allocation of LPC staff and resources. We have a very hefty, this is a very competitive business, and we realize that, and we have a very hefty marketing budget in the plan on the order of $350,000 a year over the first, for the years 2 through 5, and then 1% of gross revenues thereafter. Billing expenses, we've got that covered under the allocations to the cities. We've got vehicle maintenance as fleet services charges today, vendor maintenance, rents and utilities cover under other allocations, and then professional services that are specialized over and above what's provided by the city in the business case. This is a very capital intensive business, obviously. Outside plan is huge. We've got a 3-year build schedule. One of the things we do put in the business planning phase, and we'll talk about this a couple more times, is that based on our experience and what we've done with other clients and being in that implementation mode, we don't want to over-promise. And so part of that is to be realistic on the timing of how fast you're going to be able to build out this system. This is a large system. It does take some time to ramp up in order to be prepared to build it out. And so year 1, we have 15% and the premise is passed, and then we have a 3-year build-out schedule. So we're done by the end of year 3. We've got outside plant construction costs for both the distribution network and the feeder network. The backbone is thankfully taken care of. And then, like we talked about before, we have network upgrades. So we have outside plant upgrades in year 10 and equipment and subscriber upgrades in year 7. And so that's in there, and that's a total of $4.5 million. And we've got building upgrades, back office upgrades, vehicle capital, lots of fixed equipment. We are able to model contract installers and what those fees would be, subscriber equipment, and then, of course, engineering and implementation services. A a big piece of this is the financing. And so I just want to say, just to be clear, the financing strategy is in development. But for us to really put together a solid and understandable, complete feasibility study, we need to go ahead and model a financing approach that other clients have used and what we think might approximate what you are going to do here. So in the model, the results that I'm going to show you tonight, we have modeled for long-term financing 2 rounds of financing, so or tranches, whatever you want to call them, in year 1 and then year 2. 2 years of interest only in each round, 12 years of level payments, issuance cost, and interest rates as appropriate. And typically, most of our clients have used, a lot of our clients have used long-term financing that they weren't allowed to bundle in payment of operating losses. So they have to get short-term financing for those operating losses through another loan debt instrument. And so we model that separately. And so we model that as a line of credit over the first 5 years, and then we amortize the remaining, that balance that had been built over the first 5 years over the remaining 10 years of the plan. So the notion here is that both the long-term and the short-term financing, while they're on different amortization and payment schedules, if you're doing well, all of them will be paid back by the end of the 15th year or the first day of the 16th year. So another piece about being conservative is we treat year 1 as a startup year. And so we don't have any services revenue in the startup year 1, except what Vince has already been able to amass with his enterprise today. And we just want to set reasonable goals in terms of what we're going to be able to do in that first year. We've got other financing assumptions related to bad debt, overhead loading, interest on cash reserves, and so on. So I want to circle back to the video discussion because this for us, we've done a couple studies this year, over the past year, where we've looked at video really hard because video is an eroding business. It's a capital-intensive business. And so we want to show you side by side what those numbers actually look like in terms of comparing a double play, which is internet and phone, to a triple play, which is video, internet, and phone. And when you look at the outcomes in terms of long-term capital funding requirement and then the working capital, which is the operating loss, the net increase in funding requirement, if you're going to do video, under this case, is about $6.5 million. And so that's a material amount of additional startup costs. And so what we want to see, if we're getting into a business that's eroding, that it requires that amount of capital investment incrementally, we'd want to see a pretty fast payback on that. And while the payback does shorten the double play payback by 1 year, that's just not enough to mitigate the risk involved with the things that Dave was talking about and the fact that of the results of the market research that shows that people are starting to migrate away from a baseline video service. So the traditional, so we are saying that we are recommending that the LPC pursue a double play strategy. So I'm not going to, all these are duplicative to what Dave was talking about. So now I want to talk about sensitivity analysis, and in some cases you might run a sensitivity analysis where you would say, okay, I've got 350 inputs to my business case. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and I'm going to apply a best and worst case value to each input, and then I'm going to run that and determine what my upside and downside, what my upside opportunity is and what my downside risk is as each variable changes or each input changes. We tend to be a little bit more negative, I guess, and we only look at the downside risk. We aren't worried about the upside. Okay, so because when it really comes down to it, the downside risk is the thing you're most concerned about. And so what we've done is we've gone into the model and we've applied a downside risk element to each input, and then we run the model. And we run that model against a given outcome. And so this is when I want to discuss or define what net cash means. So in our financial analysis kind of Rubicon, we say that net cash means total cash reserves less outstanding debt and equity. Okay, so if you consider the fact that there's no equity in this plan, net cash is really the net worth of the business. Okay, So if I have a printing business and I took out a loan of $10,000, and at the end of the second year of operation, that loan, the loan balance was $5,000, and I managed to have $5,000 in the bank, my net cash at the end of 2 years is zero. So that's pretty good. Okay. The very next day I break even. Okay. The very next dollar I make, I'm in the black. And so when you look at net cash year 15, in this case, all the median inputs for all these variables show a net cash value of just north of $33 million after 15 years. That's pretty good. And so what you want to look for, and this is called a tornado diagram. Some people love it, some people hate it. The people that hate it, just give me a minute, we'll get over this in a minute. So what you want to do is, this is kind of a three-dimensional look of risk. What you want to do is you want to look at, geez, the first variable value as it's declining, that happens to be internet price. Okay, the top value is what Dave mentioned in his presentation. The bottom value is a 10% reduction. Okay, and then you look at how big that stick is, and you say, wow, is that bottom value something I can live with? Okay, over 15 years, what we would look for is not just the raw number as much as how close does that get to zero? Because if we see a case, whether it's municipal or any other case that we're doing of this nature, if you're struggling to hit 15 years, then it's an issue, and we're going to have a problem with that too, because you just don't have any margin for error. But what this says is that your net cash in year 15 is going to take an $8 million hit if, in fact, over the life of the plan, you have to drop your internet price by 10%. Okay. Then the next variable is outside plant construction. If you take a 15% overage on your outside plant construction, you're going to take I think that's $5.5 million hit on your net cash over 15 years. So the net result is you want to see a fairly tight funnel in terms of, you don't want to see a lot of lines going down to zero or going down close to zero or in the danger zone and just over and over and over. You want to see some lines that do dip down there, but then you want to see a tight cluster, because this is 10 out of 350 variables. So this gives us the ability to focus on the ones that we're really concerned about. So then the next thing we want to do is we want to look at, again, we're coming back, the baseline is the double play. So we're looking at our funding, both long-term and operating funding. We're talking about cash flow with debt service, cash reserves, net cash, project break-even. We want to see, versus the baseline, how these scenarios that were reflected in the tornado diagram, how they play out side by side to the baseline. And so you want, and the net of this is that the worst case is internet price is 10% less. You lose $8 million versus the baseline, and you go out 1 year longer on your payback. And that's your most sensitive variable, and then your fourth most sensitive variable is 11-year payback, same as what you have in the baseline, and about a $5 million hit on your net cash. So with that, and again, this is what we're doing, is presenting a very small summary of the entire deck, of the entire presentation, which is typically a 3 or 4 hour presentation with lots of sensitivity analysis, lots of scenario analysis, and everything else. But now I want to talk about the summary financials for the baseline scenario, which is the double play on a 3-year build out. So this is the money chart. Basically, over 5 years. Can everyone read that? Finally, huh? It only took us, 2.5 hours. So capital expenditures over 5 years. This is I should call this the Pac-Man chart, actually, because the outside plant construction is a big majority, 74% of your capital budget. This is why we spend so much time on sample designs and capital budgeting. If you were doing video, you'd have the next big slice would be your video piece. It'd be another 15%. Operating income, the key takeaway here is that you have 3 years of operating losses. Operating income is often referred to as earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization, or EBITDA. So it's revenue less cost of goods sold, less sales, general administrative expense, or SG&A. And so your customers are not coming on until really the third and fourth year, and then the fifth year, and that's when your revenues start to build. The reason that your margins are eroding in the outer years is because we hold price constant, and we don't continue to grow price. We don't grow price at all, actually, and we don't continue to grow penetration beyond what Dave talked about in the 5-year. It's what's called a diffusion curve. But unfortunately, expenses will never stop growing, as everyone knows, healthcare and benefits and everything else. So we do see an erosion of gross margins over the course of, or operating margin later on in the plan. Earnings before taxes and depreciation, again, EBITDA less interest expense on debt, bad debt, interest income plus interest income equals earnings before taxes and depreciation. Again, a chart very similar to the previous one. We're going positive after 3 years. In the fourth year, we go positive. The reason this one is escalating is because we are incurring less and less interest expense over time as the bond is paid down, or as your debt instrument is paid down, the way we modeled it. And then finally, this is the main thing for whenever I look at a feasibility study. I look at this chart. This is cash flow at debt service. Or free cash. If I were, when I worked at TCI, which was prior to Comcast, I would go to my bosses and we'd come in with a new product development plan. And this is the money chart for them. Okay, this is how much cash is this generating versus what it's consuming, and let's look at that over a period of time. And so what this shows is that I've got earnings before taxes and depreciation. And then I'm taking away capital spending, I'm taking away my long-term financing principal payments and my short-term financing principal payments, and then I get my cash flow with debt service. So what you're looking for here is you're looking for the yellow line to stabilize and not bounce around too much for not a good reason. When you're able to pay your principal down. So when you're paying your principal down, you'll see on the next chart that your debt is coming down, your interest is coming down, and you're building cash reserves as a result of positive cash flow. Now, you'll notice in year 7 and year 10 that we've got some dips there. That's the combined $4.5 million of reinvestment in your network as planned upgrades. Okay. So we come back to net cash again. This is net cash. We start our charts, cash flow and net cash in year 4 because we've got all kinds of weird stuff going on with bond proceeds coming in and big cash coming out to build a $30 million network. But as things settle down and we start to run the business over the last 11 years of the business, or 12 years, we're looking at our cash reserves growing and our long-term and short-term debt obligations reducing to the point where cash reserves exceed all outstanding debt. There's no equity again in year 11, and grows to a difference of $33 million in change. And so that is why between this chart and the last chart that we believe that you've got a solid business case to move forward with fiber to the premise in Longmont. Now, we can take questions.
Yes, one of my questions is, why did you make the ultra-conservative assumption that you would never raise prices, but you are accounting for your administrative costs and everything to increase with time, but you're not going to, but other providers always increase their prices down the road as their expenses go up. I mean, I was curious why you didn't.
Yeah, well, if we had video in there, we would have raised prices.
Okay.
But typically, and Dave can speak to this better than I can, but typically on the phone and the internet side, what you're doing is you're trying to make those services more and more efficient.
Okay.
So in a cable modem product, they may defer raising prices to increasing capacity. Okay, so because their cost of goods on internet has come down like a rock.
Councilmember Witt.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a question for Tom and Harold. So, kind of a concern for me is that we're trying very hard to right-size how much we spend on government services. And although this is an enterprise fund, we are adding city employees. Do they not still count as city employees if they work for you? Yes. Yes, they do. Okay. So do you feel confident that the numbers that were factored into this take into account increasing healthcare costs and 401k and every other benefit that our employees get? Are you confident that the true cost is being factored in?
You know, I haven't spent the time that I spent with our consultants. I do think that they have done a good job of estimating. You know, nobody's got a crystal ball, but taking into account what those costs can be. Yeah, I feel confident.
And I would love Bobby King to have a look at it too, if you could,
Yeah.
because we need to know what those costs are going to be, because as we all know, our biggest line item as a city is our employees, and adding 35 more employees is a significant cost. But as long as that has been factored in appropriately, then I'll trust you on that.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you that the business case grows employee costs annually.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and I'll stop there.
Councilmember Nelson.
Thank you. So first of all, with the some of the financial feasibility, when you're looking at what you consider 100% penetration rate, do you anticipate that there are only a fixed number, you know, X of people in Longmont? I mean, you're not going to assume that every single household will subscribe to some kind of internet and phone service.
No, not at all.
So what's our true market share? I mean, if we're going to be competing out there between all the other providers for, I don't know, we have 37,000 households, and if our target is 20,000 or our target's 15, if we frankly, the private providers have some flexibility to rapidly undercut us in the market, to offer everybody $10 a month for 3 years, and then we're tanked financially. So how do we know if we're really going to hit those targets with assuming we're going to set a price and that's going to be the price, and we're not going to be playing with the adjustment to see if we're right-sizing the price for what the market, I mean, it just seems like we might need a second level market analysis as we're moving forward to see how people make those choices. And I guess in that respect, I know that the Census Department doesn't, like off year after the census, 2 or 3 years later, they do an economic health report in each community and looking at regional economic data. Had you included any of that in your market analysis?
Let me start with the first two questions I think you put out, and we can go from there. You asked about the penetration. That comes directly from the market research.
Okay.
So, and the penetration numbers we have in the case would be that 36% of the homes would take internet service. Okay.
36% of homes that would take internet service. It's not going to be, we're going to assume something like if there are 37,000 households, maybe 2,000 choose not to have internet service. You're not going to get 100%.
If we have 36,000 homes passed,
right,
which we would after the 3-year build out, we'd have 36%, and the build out happens over time, and then the penetration curve takes 5 years to get to 36% as well. But at the end of that time, 36% of households passed would be taking this internet service on this network, and the remainder would be, and we know from the research that 92% of homes use internet. The remainder would be taking it from one of the incumbents. For phone, that number is 19.6%. Again, coming straight out of the research, the rest either don't have a wireline phone in the home, or they're taking the service from either Comcast or CenturyLink.
And so when you looked at the phone part of it, did you look at how the demographic is shifting in Longmont to older people, which a lot of older people like to have a landline? And to look at where there might be growth when you're looking at bringing in a private partner. I'm thinking there might be some offer of the fact that with our aging demographic that there's going to be a pretty stable amount of people that want a landline forever.
There will be. I mean, I agree there's a segment. I don't know about forever, but for some, time period going forward, yeah, certainly. But the fact is, it's now down to 1 and 2 homes in Longmont. So we need to be careful there. So
You better not insult council members who still have landlines.
So.
But some of us recognize we are dinosaurs. But
But the point would be, we're eroding it. We think that's a conservative thing to do. Okay.
Right.
So the other thing you asked about is some kind of price competition or predatory pricing or on the part of the incumbents. We haven't seen that. They compete. They compete every day. They run promotions. They run sales activity door to door, et cetera. But they certainly don't want to set a precedent in a market like this where all of a sudden competition comes in. A municipal does something like this, and magically overnight they can take their prices down by $20. That creates a precedent for them that they don't want to have occur in other markets. Comcast, for example, serves some very large markets in this country: Boston,
Philadelphia,
LA. They would not want to do that, and for that reason, we have not seen that happen.
So we're counting on the fact that that they're not going to be innovative to the point that they're going to drive people out of the market in the short term because they could do something that in long term that would help them. That's not part of their business model, even if the long-term profit, it's just the short-term profit that's being driven sometimes.
It is, but I'd also argue that's long-term profit as well, because they're driven by profit maximization, shareholder return, shareholder value. And what they would say is they would look at it at the national level. The Comcast manager here in Longmont might not like it, but certainly, someone looking at the Comcast 25 million subscriber footprint across the entire U.S. would say, we're not going to take a market and set a precedent where magically we can cut rates and then have to answer to that in, all our other markets. This is just a small piece of their subscriber base.
We're going to jump in here for just a second. But, as long as we got other people in the queue, why don't we just ask one question until there's no queue, and then you can come back and ask multiple questions. So, Councilmember Finley?
Thank you, Mayor Coons. I had 3 questions, though, but that's okay. My first question is, are we charging for installation? I didn't see that anywhere.
No, we're not. We don't have installation revenues in the case for residential services, for example.
And my second question, just real quick, is the double play, does that mean you have to take both?
No, it does not mean that. You can take either or. And that's why we have the different penetration number.
Okay. Any other questions? Councilmember Sarai.
So I'm guessing the 35 or so new employees won't be hired up front. It's phased over time as needed.
Well, and going back to slide 47, remember we peak at 35, but then we drop back down to 25 in year 5. And that's assuming that we actually hire those positions. One of the things that if council says move forward and we eventually end up into an implementation phase, one of the options that we're going to look at is contracting and how does that work? Because, that's something that we have to weigh in this calculation in terms of staffing the positions. So I think what this is assuming is worst case scenario, we have to bring all of those positions online. That will be for a defined period. So if you come in and you say in year 3, we're going to staff up to 36.5, and in year 5 and year 4, we're going to drop to 26.5. Those folks, if we hire them internally, will know that that's a 1-year commitment. And we have to be really diligent in making sure that we stick to this pro forma, because when you start deviating from the information they're providing us, it changes all our numbers. And then part of it is, as Tom indicated, you see 14 install technicians in year 3. That's actually where we're looking at the contracting coming in.
Councilmember Baldwin? Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I have a compound question. Okay. Not multiple questions, compound question. To be connected with the word and. Okay. So I shall pause. So first of all, who's the one person ultimately responsible for making sure this works?
You.
Not me. Who on staff is the one person ultimately responsible for making sure this works?
Well, obviously, I'm ultimately responsible for making sure that this works.
Who are you going to sign this to?
I'm right behind him.
Oh, okay. And I guess the next question is, I'm a big believer in if you have the right people, they'll figure out the right strategy and execute that strategy correctly. So I was stumbling. I was yes. And no, Tom, I know you. I've seen how you work. I've got one question for you. Okay, will this work?
Yes, I think it will. It's been proven to work in other, a lot of the other communities that they talked about that have been very successful in doing things very similar were not in close to as good a shape as we are today and have some of the facilities in place that we have here in Longmont. So it's definitely, I do believe it'll work. Yeah.
Okay. And then I guess the other question is, there were a lot of assumptions, which are okay. You have to, discount rates and bad debt and overhead, and where did you get these from? I know you got the 36% from your surveys and whatnot.
Yeah.
But if it were a job interview or if you were in my class, I'd be saying, where'd you get the discount rate? Where did these come from?
Yeah, so there's kind of on the revenue side, a lot of that comes from the research. Then we have capital inputs in the plan. A lot of that is driven by the sample designs to get the ratios, if you will, the densities, et cetera. And then what we use vendor bids. So we're always work with a number of clients where, or we go out to the vendor community, we get current pricing for the equipment that is involved, the labor rates that are involved, so much to do a splice, et cetera. So we're constantly, in one way or another, in contact there. And then the other piece of it would be the OpEx side. And that's where we have clients that are up and running, and we get the headcount ratios there that you saw. We use your wage rates. We use your loading rates on the wages. So we go get real numbers. So assumptions is kind of maybe not the best word for it. They're inputs, but we, to the extent we can, we drive all that down to something that's real, either through a deployed system or by getting quotes and actual numbers.
And on this chart, right? It's a run-on sentence. I'm terrible at grammar. My grammar is terrible. Right here, you pointed out F and LPC on.
Which, can you tell me what slide that is?
Looks like slide 18.
There we go.
Yeah. So I guess my question is, LPC, that's a double play. Is F also a double play? Those are double, not a triple play, but this is double play of video and internet. F is. So which is the one most likely like us?
I would say still F because you're a double play without video, and it would still be F because our reasoning for that is that by eliminating video, you're eliminating a lot of customer service issues. Your thing you have in common with them is internet. And phone is being handled mostly by your phone partner.
A lot of my concerns went away as soon as Tom Roniotta says we can do this. But my question is, what makes us think that LPC, that's never done this before, a government entity outside the capitalistic, free market, what makes us think that we can do it better than the free market? What is the underlying assumption here that says that we can do this better?
I would say it's the same thinking and the same culture that creates what I call the skyscraper chart of people prefer to do business with LPC. Well, LPC is the community. They love you. The community loves LPC. And I'm sorry, Tom, but they love all of the public power utilities that they do business with. So you're in really good company. But it is. It's a different culture. And it's not, when people say it's not about profit, you need to be a little bit careful there. Maybe it's not about profit. You still have to have cash flow. You can't run at a deficit, right? But you don't have that long-term profit Wall Street motive that drives your actions.
It seems to me that we're picking, good technology, proven technology. It's not new technology now. We're picking the best gold standards. And then we've gone out to communities that have been very, very successful doing this, and we're trying to do exactly like they did it. If you see a successful business, if you just copy that business, then you'll be successful. I mean, I know that works. So, I'm feeling pretty confident about this. Sure.
Mayor Combs and Councilmember Begg, by the way, I appreciate the vote of confidence, but
That's a future blame. That's a confidence. See this date right there.
But when we say we're going to do this, we're not going to do this by ourselves. Just like we wouldn't have attempted to do a feasibility study by ourselves. We bring in who we think are the best private sector people in the country to come and help advise us. And if you guys give us the direction to move forward, we're gonna do the same sort of thing when we roll this system out. We'll look to make sure that we hire the expertise, and we'll get the best. We talk about a private-public partnership. In a sense, that's kind of how we'll build this. It's kind of how we started. That's why we've got consultants here that we haven't done this before. These guys have been doing this for 16 years. So I just wanted to make that clear.
I think if we can also tag on to another point, we're not rolling something out that is brand new. I think what needs to be pointed out in this conversation is that we're using this network today. The city's using it. The school district is using it, and LUH is utilizing this network today. So I get from build out, some major entities in the community have been utilizing it. We have some very sensitive functions on this network that we rely on a daily basis. And I think it's important to point that out. We have been doing this for a while.
Councilmember Sinari.
I think likewise it's important to point out that the local providers or the current providers are not currently providing it everywhere in the community. Okay, I know from personal experience, because when Mayor Pro Tem Santos and myself met with Comcast originally, they had no service to the industrial park where my business was, and we couldn't even get DSL service there. So I know that the current providers can't cover the whole city. There's room for us to play, and there's room for them to play. And when I've met with the service providers, where they came to convince me that I shouldn't, support this, etc., what I suggested to them, as opposed to coming and telling us how we're going to fail or why we will fail, why not come to us with solutions that would help all of us succeed? They know we have a network. They know we have the fiber around the city, as opposed to building their own or telling us that we're going to fail if we try to do it on our own. Since they have the expertise and the capability, why not take advantage of what we already have in place and make us all successful? So we're not fighting or competing. But again, competition is good. And just because we're enterprise or government entity doesn't mean that the free market doesn't apply to us as well. If somebody can do it better, more power to them. And the current providers don't have gigabyte service to every place in the city, and especially not to residential. I would think that would be their last bastion, because they can make more money selling it to corporate accounts as opposed to residential.
Councilmember Levison.
So I'm gonna I just have something pulled up from a white paper from National League of Cities that I got as an attachment to an email inviting me to join a webinar that they're having on the 20th around technology and broadband issues. And in fact, giving the cases of all the cities that have been successful in rollouts and how they did it. So it's if we would have been talking about this next Tuesday, we'd have even more points to talk about. But one of the things in the white paper that's interesting is that there's a quote from a person that does telecommunications initiatives at the Institute for Local Reliance, that his assessment was that the big carriers have stopped investing in next generation networks, leaving communities with few options but to consider their own investment. So I'm looking at this as building on what Councilmember Samori said. If we have the carriers here and it's not, they don't have a fiber network already, they're not going to put one in until they can show that it's ultimately profitable for the investment, and looking at, you know, what their quarterly returns have to be, profitability for shareholders. But we could do a leap forward with the fiber we already have invested in, and so being able to be that advantage will really help the community. So again, I think that if there was a private provider that they don't want to use the network we built, then that's fine. We're not going to stop them if they want to come in and do a fiber network and a backbone and everything else. We're still going to give them the right-of-way permits and everything, won't we? And they can come in and build the system as well.
Councilmember, thank you, Mayor. So I've kind of taken a lot of what I've heard tonight, and what makes sense to me is the reason why that the private industry hasn't done this is that they haven't seen the demand necessary to invest. And I think we're looking at it differently. Build it and they will come. We are probably putting in a Lexus system here, which I shouldn't use because I'll say Cadillac because of Lexus. So we're probably getting a Cadillac system that perhaps we can't utilize all of the features that we're buying at this time. But what we will be doing is, I believe we will be creating demand, which I think will actually benefit the competition in the long run, because we're going to grow the base of support for super fast internet. So we're oversupplying to create demand. And business doesn't do that. I think that government is doing that here in this case. But I think it's going to be, it's a calculated risk, it's a gamble, but it's seemed to have paid off in other areas. And if Tom is true to his word, then we'll all be fine, right?
Good.
Wow. No, because Councilmember, you know, you're right. What we're asking for something special here in Longmont. We and I prefer we're building for the future here. And a lot of people might ask, well, why doesn't CenturyLink and why doesn't Comcast build a fiber to the home network here? Well, the bottom line, they're smart business folks. They're in business to make money. And as much money as Comcast has, they cannot afford to build fiber networks in every city in the country. So the question you have to ask yourself is, why would they build in Longmont? They won't. If you're a smart business, you're going to build where you have the greatest return on your dollar. And that's always been in the larger metropolitan areas, and that's just smart business. So we got to ask ourselves, I mean, we could continue to wait for the private sector to come here, and maybe eventually someday they would, after they maximize their profits, which is what their stockholders would expect them to do in the larger metropolitan markets. But can we afford to wait? Can we afford to pass up an opportunity like this and improve the economic development potential of our city? And so, I mean, and that's what we're talking about here today. We've waited 16 years. There's a reason why they haven't come. It's basic business. So, tonight we have an opportunity. We've spent a lot of time talking about a lot of details, doing a lot of sensitivity analysis. I feel confident that we've looked at all the scenarios, and we've got a very good chance of making this thing successful. And remember, this is only looking at the cash flow and the financial viability of the utility. We haven't even begun to talk about the advantages to the community from an economic development standpoint, the improvements, and we've talked about it, but we haven't quantified any of that.
Councilmember Santos.
Thank you, Mayor. Tom, very well said. For us, this is our Ralph Price. This is our electric utility. This is the moment for us. So I move that we direct the LPC staff to continue pursuing the development of the citywide fiber optic network and direct the city finance director to pursue favorable financing options.
Councilmember Gregory.
The only question I have before I vote on this, which I will be voting for, I've got concerns, but more than anything, it was, don't be thinking this is easy. That was pretty much it, because nobody else was asking these questions, so I figured somebody had better. And then, Jim, Mr. Golden, have you had a chance to look? I mean, the motion includes that we direct you to pursue favorable financing options. So my question is, how familiar are you with the consultant's math, and are you in agreement with it?
Mayor Coombs, members of council, I've seen the presentation you have seen. I've seen the data as well, the business case data. I could certainly go through it in more detail. I've looked at some of their information. I think it all gets back down to the assumptions. I think the business staff and LPC have also looked at the numbers. And if you're, I can't tell you about the assumptions. We're all looking at the assumptions and decide whether or not those are reasonable or not. But the numbers look so good so far. We will try to bring to you some financing options.
Thank you.
Councilmember Larson.
Jim, when we're looking at, and Harold, when we're looking at the financing options, can we have our financial advisors, my assumption is that they're going to review these kind of analysis too to make sure that second pair of eyes or two more pairs of eyes to look at something might see some flaw in assumption or a misplaced decimal point or something.
Mayor Coombs, members of council, and our financial advisor has also seen the same information, and again, we're looking at it from the same perspective. So hopefully, we're catching those decimal points. We're from a business case perspective, we are relying on the experts for their recommendations, but we will hear from them as well when we make that presentation on the options.
They've actually been in discussions going over this information.
Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. I also wondered if perhaps we shouldn't have someone who is, and maybe we do have, and I just don't know, someone who looks at risk assessment for businesses, take a look at our business model and see if they find any holes in it. And not a municipal worker or someone from a competitor, a potential competitor, but someone who knows the industry and could provide, maybe see something we don't see in risk assessment. Just a thought.
Mayor, Council, as you know, Dave Manny had some experience in this and talked about it, and he is actually putting us in touch with an individual that has worked in this arena, and we're in the process now of actually trying to schedule the meetings and go over this process. So we are getting ready to move in that type of conversation.
All right. Councilmember Santos.
Thank you, Mayor. The only thing I would like to see is in the financial options is that, as I stated earlier, if we're gonna, their recommendation is to have the two, the video and the broadband, telephone. Sorry. I'd like to see that and just the broadband by itself. That's not. I'd like to see those two options. Not a motion. It's just I'd like to. I know it's in here, but
No, we ran the phone, the internet only case.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, we ran that, and it pushes it out beyond 15 years. You have to do phone. Sorry.
I just have insurance with that. So
Had to
okay.
ask.
We'll just see how it all comes back with this motion. So we'll look forward to it.
Councilmember Harvey? Thank you, Mayor Coombs. Going back to that comment, I mean, rewinding, I was kind of thinking this, I was thinking in terms, as I was watching your presentation, I'm thinking in terms of internet, all the comments, all the hype. So, okay, let's talk phone now. So was your comment that in order to be successful, that we need to play in the telephone arena? Are we going to become a baby bell? Are we going to, what's the plan? Are we looking for public-private partnerships?
Yeah, absolutely.
And those will come forward?
That will be actually RFP, basically. You'll submit an RFP. That is, like Dave said, the model of a phone CLEC or competitive local exchange carrier partner doing all the heavy lifting and coming in and you pay by the drink to use their service. That is the definitive model today for municipal broadband deployments all over the country.
Were your, I don't remember, I wasn't paying, like I said, I wasn't looking at phone. But did you do a lot of questioning about phone service as well?
Oh yeah, the research was full triple play plus security.
Right. So my question is, it just, I don't know, maybe I don't have any data to back this up, but it just feels like if we're going to go wrong, it's going to be in the phone.
Yeah, Dave showed the benchmarking phone penetrations of other clients and other deployments that have been going on. I mean, all the phone projections are conservative. I mean, the internet penetration is north of 36%, and the phone penetration is sub 20.
Okay.
So,
All right.
we're.
All right, I'm ready to go.
The phone is dying over time, too.
Thank you.
So we're modeling that.
Let's vote. Okay, passes 7-0. So got your direction, Tom. All right, it's time for council comments. Councilmember Witt.
I win. Yeah, first roll. This is the second time that, oh dear, just a sec. John Cody, there it is, has come in and asked for our help in getting the NSA name change. I would like to direct staff to work on that. Can I?
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Well, I would just point out that I've already been in contact with Brad Power, who is out of town, but he has already, I think, assigned that task, so we're on it.
Okay. 7-0.
Okay. You had a vote 7-0. So
Councilmember Levison.
Thank you. I have a couple of items. First item is that I attended the Longmont Symphony Pops concert on Saturday evening, and I am happy to announce that in our presence this evening, we have a superconductor contender in our own Dale Rademacher, and I will repeat what he said on Saturday night. If you see him show up with a clarinet, you'll have to pay him not to play. So if you see him carrying a case that looks smaller than, not a violin case, but smaller, bigger than a flute case, then please just give the man $1 or pledge $1 to him. I just want to wish Dale good luck on that endeavor. The other two candidates in the running are Ellen Ranson, a well-known personality who left people with an image on her bucket list, which is you had to be there. And then John Creighton, head of the school board, and his entourage during Ellen's remarks turned to him and said, "You don't have a prayer." So, we'll see how it goes, but congratulations for the honor, Dale. And it was very enjoyable to see you up there, very red-faced in trying to votes already. One other item I want the council's consideration on. I'm currently serving on the Colorado Municipal League Board, and when I had the election last year, I attained a one-year seat. I'd like to try again for the CML board, and I'd like council's support on that. In order to get my application in, it's a requirement to run. And then the other consideration I'd like your help on is I'm considering running for the National League of Cities Board of Directors. Last couple of years I've been going to meetings and noticed that we haven't had any representation from Colorado, and I think since Kathy Novak was president of the National League of Cities. So I'd like to make a go for that board, and again I need the support of council, and I'd like to get an early start on talking to people about whether or not I'd be a viable candidate, and I don't feel comfortable doing that unless you guys give me the nod. So just wait for some discussion.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, I'd like to make the motion to put forward Council Member Levison's nomination for the CML Board and the National League of Cities Board.
Okay, let's vote.
Do I get to vote?
Of course. No. Sure.
Leave the room.
All right. Oh, it passes 7-0.
Congratulations.
Councilmember Finley.
Thank you, Mayor Coombs. Sarah, I was going to say I'll vote yes if you promise to only speak 3 minutes to every item on the agenda. But I voted for it anyway. My business of the week this week is going to be a place that just struck me today as a place I always look to when the temperatures get to be a little high, and that's the Dairy Queen on Main Street. I've gone there ever since I was a child, and it's still, every time I drive by there on a hot day, has a pull that's almost magnetic. So it's a great business, been around forever. Go to your Dairy Queen next time you get hot.
I was invited to go to the Silver Creek Leadership Academy Awards last night, and it was a pretty tremendous, that's a great program. We had, I think, 27 people that did all kinds of things, from collecting shoes that went to Haiti to, Peyton Peterson, was kind of a keynote speaker, and he talked about not only the fiber network and the stuff he did with that, but also he explained to the general population what are the functions that the city does, and I was just real impressed with his presentation quality, and I mean the quality of all the presentations. And I think we should have a shout out to Carrie Adams, who leads up that, with a lot of help, and also a lot of the people in the mentors. There must have been about a dozen mentors, including Vincent. And Scott Cook from the chamber. I mean, it was just a team community effort. I mean, I was just really proud of this community to put something on like that. It was impressive. So, great shout out to Silver Creek Leadership Academy and to Carrie Adams and all the mentors and all the people that supported that program. Councilmember Santos.
Thank you, Mayor. I did forget something, and I apologize for coming in after you. This Friday at 12:45 is the Peace Officers Memorial Service at the Safety and Justice Center, established in 1962 by President John F. Kennedy and a joint resolution by Congress. The National Police Week pays special tribute to those law enforcement officers who have lost their lives in the line of duty for the safety and protection of others. Ceremonies are held in Washington, D.C. and communities across the country. On this Friday, May 17th, the Front Range Chaplains and the Longmont Police Department will hold their annual Peace Officer Memorial Service. Please join us on the front steps of the Safety and Justice Center, 225 Kimbark Street at 1 o'clock, but I get there at 12:45 if I were you, as we honor the fallen police brothers and sisters. So I'd invite everyone to attend.
All right, City Manager, any remarks?
I do have a couple tonight, Mayor and Council. First, I'd like Jim Golden to come down and to talk about recent debt issuance.
Mayor Coombs, members of council, yesterday we held the bond sale for the wastewater revenue bonds, $7.785 million that you approved at your last regular meeting. And we received an interest rate of 2.789%. We received 4 bids. That, of course, was the lowest, ranged from that 2.79 to a high of 3.04%. Winning bidder was Raymond James and Associates. We had projected that we would be at least 3% or lower, and our annual debt service we projected would be around $570,000. So it's actually going to range anywhere from a low of $539,000 to a high of $567,000. So we're pretty pleased with that result, and I'm sure that citizens who may be interested in purchasing those bonds will be able to access them through the Raymond James outlets. So, questions?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good job. Any other?
Yes, Mayor, Council. I know it's been a long night thus far. We indicated last week during the council meeting when we talked about boating at Union Reservoir that we were going to talk about swimming. Basically, as it stands and we look at the water level, we are going to be able to allow swimming this year at Union. As council may recall, one of the things that we talked about from a funding standpoint during the last budget cycle was that we were going to need to raise some fees to cover lifeguard expenses at that location. But at that time, we actually determined that based on the fact that we may not have water, we were going to hold that discussion. As we continued moving through the winter months, we still were not sure that we were going to have water, and then with some great snowfall late in the season, it allowed us to make that determination. We were thinking that we may have to come to council and ask for an appropriation to fund the lifeguards, but during that process, we had some great work that's been done by our parks operations staff, and they were able to reduce the vehicles that we have in our fleet. And so they have saved a substantial amount of money. There is a series of one-time dollars that they've saved, and there's also ongoing expenses. And so we're actually going to utilize the ongoing expenses within the parks budget to pay for the lifeguards this year. We will bring those fee increases that we talked about during the last budget cycle forward again during this budget cycle, but it was really with a lot of hard work that the folks in parks operations went through, and public works and natural resources, that we actually have the savings to cover that cost this year. And so we will be bringing you more of that information in terms of how we're looking at those dollars that were saved in the future. So I just wanted to report there will be swimming. We're going to be able to cover that cost through budget savings. And so we're not going to have to come to council for any specific action on that item.
Thank you.
I do have one more item. It is with a heavy heart today that we have to report to the council that we lost a city employee yesterday. Mike Lawson. Mike works in public works and natural resources. He was a great man, a great friend to the folks that he worked with, and a valued employee to our organization. He was a public works technician, and he served with the city for over 21 years. Mike recently made the decision to retire. And as Dale indicated, he was really excited about his retirement. So, pass our condolences on to his family. The organization is very saddened with this. And as Dale said in an email today, in Mike's memory, take a moment today to tell someone how much you care for him. And so big loss to the organization, and we're going to be working with the folks that had day-to-day contact with Mike and meeting with them tomorrow afternoon. So wanted to pass that on to council.
All right, thanks. City Attorney, any comments?
No comments, Mayor.
Okay, this meeting is adjourned.